Everybody got the memo.
What's that? Christmas ties, is that
Yeah,
what you mean?
your Christmas ties. Smash, yes. I'm always borrowing one.
Madam President, Commissioners, good evening. It is now 5 o'clock.
Go. Thank you very much, Director Wong. We're going to go ahead and start this evening with a work session on our 2023, and we're going to welcome Mr. Ben Broxham to come up. Not yet?
Not yet.
Oh.
Commissioners, again, what we
Get
have
him the
set
batter
this.
box.
Yeah, go sit back down. What we have set this time aside is basically an open discussion for all of you to give us at the 100,000 foot level the concepts, ideas, initiatives that you would like us to start working in preparation for the legislative session. So this is your forum. We have lots of people in the audience taking notes and such. So with that, Commissioners, over to you.
All right. Now, I'd like to welcome Mr. Ben Broxham to come up and be part of our discussion. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Madam President and Commission. Ben Broxham, contract lobbyist for ACHD. We did just finish the new orientation for the new legislature coming in January. Chairmanships have been assigned, committee assignments have been made, and the bodies are ready for work. We're in a polite lull right now until the session kicks off. There's a whole series of inaugural events leading up to this session, and then January 9th will be the State of the State and the kickoff. So a lot of conversations, a lot of promises from campaigns across the state. Certainly with a surplus again this year and the results of the special session, there's a lot to do this year. Specifically with transportation funding, I think the governor's initiatives are still very strong to continue funding and expanding funding, including supporting local funding. We'll be working with House and Senate leadership to kind of refine those goals and have a clearer understanding of what that means ahead of session. And certainly would love feedback from you all on what you're hearing from your constituents, what your needs are in different parts of the district, and happy to offer advice and what little wisdom I may have leading into January.
All right, we'll go ahead and kick it off. Commissioner McKinney, do you want to start on that end of the dais?
I suppose, you know, the biggest issue, of course, that ACHD faces, well, twofold. Of course, we have some kind of big ticket items staring us in the face that need to be done that we don't currently have the resources to do. And as far as our, you know, legislative connections are concerned, the additional funding that came through that was voted in last year is a big help. And it would be great if something similar to that happened again this year, but it's the kind of thing that I don't suppose we can necessarily, you know, we don't go asking for that specifically, and we don't, but, you know, with the governor pushing transportation improvements, you know, we're obviously happy to receive that. The kind of, the two issues that remain, seems to me, with these big ticket items that we're looking down the road toward is, well, kind of the control factor. The only aspect of our budget that we control, of course, is the property tax rate. And if there are other avenues that we could obtain to have a little more control in that regard, that's something, but I don't know that this is necessarily the year to go pushing for that. And so in my mind, that puts us back to kind of saying, okay, what can we do this year to encourage the legislature and the governor's office to be willing to push a little more toward, you know, some of that surplus toward transportation, some of it making its way to Ada County Highway District. And that, in my mind, strikes me as the best thing that we can do. So I'd be happy to hear comments on that.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, Madam President, Commissioner, I think that's well said. There is a surplus. We spent some time in the Capitol on September 1st working on a special session to allocate some of those resources towards education specifically. That reduced that surplus, but there's still a surplus. I think the commitments that have been made were multi-year last year under the governor's prerogative and the previous legislature. So there's really a kind of a litmus test as the new folks come in and as the committees have readjusted about whether we're going to continue that. We certainly have the funding to do that. It would not be the one-time funding, but similar to the 200 million that we saw last year, that would be slated for this year as well. If we can get that through, that's a 60-40 split to the locals. So we would certainly see a benefit to, from that. One of the things I think you're likely to see with a new class and a new legislature is a little bit of a more pragmatic approach about how those dollars are being used and a little bit different oversight. Some of the levels of trust and relationship building that we've had for many years and that the district has maintained may shift with some of the new folks who are going to be a little more conscientious about how those dollars are spent or even what they're spent on. And so that balance between state control, local control of those funds will be very important in our negotiations and discussions. I think the understanding with the growth and the goal to limit the increases in property taxes, you all have done a good job to manage that. The state recognizes that and is trying to offset that. How that takes shape will be very interesting. I know there's several property tax ideas floating around. I haven't seen copies of drafts of anything yet. I suspect we'll start to see those in January. But I do think there is a concerted effort to continue to manage and reduce property tax and the burden that that is on citizens without raising fees and taxes on other places where we have a surplus, right? So trying to get that equalized a little bit better. And there's some pragmatic things like the strategic one-time funding that we can do to offset that. But we also need long-term solutions, and so we'll be diving in on those in the legislative session as well.
Well, and I think it's worth noting, I'm very aware, and I believe the rest of the commission is aware that, you know, the state legislature is watching us. They're aware of what we do, and you know, their ongoing concern, of course, is how we manage the resources that we have. And I think this past year, the BSU survey that we had done, as well as a recent survey that was done by the city of Meridian, overwhelmingly show that what the residents of the county want us to do is to, you know, expand roads, because we've got a lot of substandard and inadequate roadway areas in the county. And, you know, definitely, I think if that's I suspect that the legislature shares that view, that providing for growth is like the number one, should be the number one priority. And if they, hopefully if they see us moving in that direction, they'll be well disposed to help us out. At least I'm hoping that's the case.
Yeah, I think that's well said as well. You know, managing growth is always a challenge, especially a challenge now with high inflation and supply chain issues coming out of a pandemic, right? And so putting money towards things is a wonderful thing, especially large sums of one-time money, but that doesn't stretch as far as it used to, right? So we're seeing that, we're suffering that. Some of the other things that are being worked on is workforce development. Part of that special session was to create a fund with $80 million. That's not for necessarily higher ed for philosophy degrees, but it's for welders, CDLs, linemen, nurses, right? So those in-demand careers that we know we have shortages on, several of those have a nexus to the district and enabling folks to get through those programs quickly, receive funding to, you know, state scholarships essentially to work through that process and get them into the workforce. That helps the labor side. We still have the supply chain issue that we have to work through. So the cost of raw materials constantly going up. Again, inflation costs, somewhat out of our control, but still have to be managed by what we manage, right? So all of those are on the table. I think you'll hear about those in the state of the state. I think you'll see both the House and the Senate grappling with those pragmatically and trying to work on solutions for those, as well as trying to get locals additional funding so that they don't have to increase fees or taxes.
Excellent, thank
Very
you.
good. Commissioner Hanson.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Ben.
My pleasure.
You have about, what, a third new legislators?
Just shy of 50%.
Just shy of 50. Do you know how many have some experience in local government?
That's a good question. So we're working through resumes is probably not the right word, bios and gaining better understandings of professional and personal backgrounds for each of the new folks. I will say with the transition and the loss of historical knowledge, that can be a challenge, but you also have a lot of fresh folks who will bring new approaches and new pragmatic ideas, and they may not have some of the political experience of some of the others, but they also don't carry the burden of grudges and historical knowledge, right? And so the former speaker, now Lieutenant Governor-elect, made a great point that the new class of freshman legislators coming in will listen better and differently than the folks that were there. And so it's our job collectively to inform them and educate them on what's important and what we need, and that provides opportunity. It also creates a little bit of chaos, but we can work through that chaos and utilize the opportunity.
Well, I think you'll find that those, regardless of what their positions are on a lot of different issues, with some experience actually making decisions in local government, on a city council, on a county commission, will be our allies in helping to understand why it's really important not to constantly interfere with or make it more and more difficult for local government to operate. To recognize that, you know, we have assets to manage, public assets, and we have to manage them in a very fiscally prudent way. And we want to maximize the return on those assets, and that's our role. And of course, I hear from people in an area that is pretty well, I mean, the city of Boise is not going to expand its jurisdiction, and yet it is growing. And what we're starting to see now is not growth that is going out, but growth that is going dense. And what that says is that's where the demand is. I think Boise's population and Meridian's population is going to grow significantly in the next decade without any increase in their footprint. But what they're going to have to do is figure out how to use their current assets in order to create a greater return. And the harder it is for them to do that, or the harder it is for businesses who want to do that in those cities. So making sure the cities have that kind of flexibility, especially in, you know, this growing dense urban area of Boise and Meridian. You know, I think that's really, really important, because we're being as fiscally prudent as we can, but we usually need some more flexibility. I bet the allies who are on local government will understand that, so that they can sort of calm those who say, you know, we've seen this a number of times. Someone gets upset with some decision a local government makes, and they don't get redress from that city. So then they go to the legislature and they want to take away that authority from all the local governments to do that. And fortunately, we've stopped a lot of stuff that might have gotten far, but some things have slipped through, and it just makes our life harder. Those allies who have some experience in local government say, hey, you know, let's not make it harder and harder for local governments to function in the state. Let's give them the resources, the tools, not necessarily resources, the tools to use public assets in a most fiscally responsible way.
Yeah, Madam President, Commissioner, I think that's a good perspective. There are several new legislators coming in with local government experience, others who have served in leadership positions, whether that's on a board or a company, or in the military, et cetera. And so some of those are here locally from the Treasure Valley, right? We have city council members moving into the Senate, et cetera. We also have some folks from the rural areas that are former county commissioners and city council members that understand the small agricultural communities throughout the state. And so striking that balance and understanding that what works for downtown Boise probably doesn't work for downtown Arco, and vice versa, right? And managing that. But I think the more collaborative the district can be and has been, the more pragmatic we can be with our mayors and our county commissioners for this area. That will help a lot as we have those conversations if the local units of government are unified in their visions and goals and things like that. So I think continued outreach, continued participation in the organizations that push those are a very positive thing. And again, we'll have a steep learning curve for some of these new folks, but there is a good chunk of institutional knowledge there as well, and some pretty pragmatic folks that want to do good things for the state. So,
Yeah, good.
Very good. Thank you, Ben.
my pleasure.
Madam President,
Oh, I did hear.
Oh, Commissioner Pickering.
Yes, thanks, Madam President. Hi, Ben. I was wondering, have you talked with Nick at all with the Association of Highway Districts and, learn more about what if there's anything that they're going to be presenting that we can either learn more about, just so that we're not caught flat-footed about some of the legislative priorities that they have? Anything on that note?
Yeah, thank you. Madam President, Commissioner, we are in process of reaching out to them amongst several others, Compass included, cities, counties, et cetera. So we've been in a weird holding pattern post-election and pre-orientation where all the committees were assigned, and now we know who we're working with and kind of what to expect. So my team and I have been in meetings 10, 12 hours a day, calling around and working with the different stakeholders. I have not met with Nick yet, but he is on the list of folks to meet with between now and Christmas to try to make sure we're on the same page and working together. We've talked to several of the mayors. We're continuing to do that outreach, and we'll continue to do that throughout session as well. But yeah, the goal is to have as united a front as possible and as much communication as possible. So we'll include feedback from those meetings in our regular reports to the commission as well.
Thank you, Ben. I have no doubt whatsoever that you'll do that, and looking forward to collaboratively working with all of those partners that we did last year. And I just would emphasize, just similarly with what previously the commission has said and what you've shared, is, developing those relationships are really, really important. And anything that we can do to foster those relationships. And, I know these legislators are very, very busy, but anything we can do to provide stories and examples of how important certain things are when they reach their desk, we're happy to accommodate that. So thank you for prioritizing the relationship building nature of this session.
Yeah, absolutely. Madam President, Commissioner, I think one of the exciting and fun parts of this kind of massive transition we're going through with the legislature right now is a dedication to serve, right? We have a lot of new folks that are really eager to create change and make an impact and do good things for their constituents. And that's meshed with the folks that are already there and in positions of leadership, chairmanship, et cetera, who have some of the wisdom and guidance to kind of help them refine those things. And so the more the community partners can work together to help educate and carve off rough edges and make sure we have good policy moving forward, the overlapping constituents that we all care about are the ones that benefit. So absolutely a main target goal for us at all times.
Very good. Well said, Ben. Okay, Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Couple things, not during the last session, but during the ensuing months, we've had a couple little conversations about how we might be able to nuance something with the legislature to help overcome the financial challenges that are created by the 6 figures plus of vehicle trips per day that come into our county from outside, and that we receive basically, and it wreaks havoc on us maintenance wise and that sort of thing. And I would like to see some conversation started with regards, because it's a long-term thing. It happens every day, all day. And it won't stop. It's not something you can fix with one-time funding. That maybe when you deal with the folks that are making the longer-term changes and taking the longer view, that this be something that's discussed, as well as and this is going to take years, but we have a few years. The discussion about equalizing or putting more fairness into the vehicle registration fee program, so that the next time we take an initiative to the voters that we think ought to be a slam dunk, that we don't get our faces kicked.
Yeah, well said. I think, the data that we saw a couple weeks ago, we've had roughly 60,000 people moving to the state year over year. So that's not just the Valley, that's statewide, right? But that's a tremendous amount of people coming in, buying homes, needing resources, wanting to use the roads, the parks, the restaurants, et cetera. And so how we manage that and how we partner with our state partners at ITD is very important, because people don't stop at political subdivision boundaries, right? They don't stop at city limits, they don't stop at county lines, they move through, as does business. And so, again, I think that goes back to the relationship building and the awareness of, as important as Ada County and the Highway District here is, we also have to be cognizant of what's happening around us, right? Growth and development in Elmore County, Canyon County, Gem County, et cetera, and continuing to build those relationships. We also have a new chairman on the Transportation Committee in the Senate who's from North Idaho and going to have a different list of priorities. I think he generally understands the needs of Ada County Highway District and will be very supportive. But he has a set of constituents that don't operate in the valley, right? And so those dynamics create different situational awareness. So again, I think that collective whole of let's see what we can do statewide to really help everyone, and let's make sure that the Highway District benefits from those outcomes is a priority. To the ballot initiatives and asking voters for permission, I think we had a good example of how that might work following the special session. And in November, 4 out of 5 voters approved or supported the funding of education and the lowering of taxes. And so I think you'll see a lot of momentum from legislators looking for those pragmatic things. There's a lot of talk about how to help the locals without burdening people with additional things that where you have to go ask them for money at a ballot box. And so, again, some of that is one time and some of that will be strategic long-term. We'll absolutely include you and do our best to make sure you're at the table in those conversations and negotiations.
Very good. Any other suggestions or concerns or comments for Ben? One more?
May I ask one question? You mentioned committee assignments, and we have previously Senator Winder has been the Transportation Committee Chairman in the Senate and Representative Palmer in the House. Is that still the case? Or have those changed?
Madam President, Commissioner, most recently, Senator Lori Den Hartog was Chair of Transportation. Senator Winder is pro tem, the head of the Senate. So currently, Representative Doug Okonowitz from Coeur d'Alene will be chair, and Lori Den Hartog will be vice chair this year. Chairman Palmer is still chairman of House Transportation.
And Ben Okonowitz was on the House Transportation Committee, correct?
Previously, that's correct.
Okay, so he does have some experience there.
And we did, Madam President, just for the commission, we did send out a report last Friday with all committee assignments. If it's easier to digest, instead of all 105, just the transportation committees, we're happy to redraft those and get those out so you guys can familiarize yourself with that. Okay.
Thanks, Ben.
We may include the budget committee members from JFAC as well for you.
That would be a good one
Okay.
for him too.
Happy to.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, any other questions or comments? Any final thoughts, Ben?
Just again, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be of service to you and to the district. It's a chaotic time, but I think everything is settling in, and we are very eager and excited to get session underway and make a good impact for you again this year. As always, if there's ever anything we can do or you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll look forward to continued communication and progress as we move forward.
Well, Ben, you and your team have done an excellent job. You know, you're steady as she goes, the weekly updates, and when you were out for a little bit, Peyton stepped in, and I think we had a meeting or two, and she did a fabulous job. So we know the commission is in good hands, and we appreciate all your hard work. So thank you for all that you've done.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Okay.
Madam President, Commissioners, to Commissioner Goldthorpe's point, again, I'd like to remind you that the registration fee program for Safe Routes to Sidewalks does sunset. And with your permission, the staff would like to start the thoughts on strategy for all of you as we move forward toward that. This is going to, as Commissioner Goldthorpe indicated, going to be a multi-year progress, but it's in FY23, we believe that's the time to start for a 28 event for the legislature and for the voters. So with your concurrence, we will be starting that during this year to provide you the options, and then you can give us your decisions as to where you want us to go or where you don't want us to go on this sort of thing. And secondly, to Commissioner Hansen's point, in front of you, you've got the impact fee report. If you look at Boise and Meridian, you will see a tremendous growth in the commercial impact fee investments, as I call it, going forward. So yes, there is going to be and continues to be both growth in the residential, but as important, the commercial sector for both of those two cities at this point in time.
Very good. I think Commissioner.
Madam President.
I have a question. Yeah, just to comment, I think, one of the reasons the vehicle registration fee issue failed a couple of years ago was because it was so different than the initial one. The initial one was created from a citizens group. There was a lot of input initially that they then brought that in, and instead of it initiating from the commission or the agency. So I think I'd like to see that be the approach to chambers of commerce, the businesses, the neighborhood leaders, and our civic partners, and say, let's get the smartest heads you can put together and say, how would you approach this? It's been a long time, 2008, 14 years. Lots has changed. How would you recommend we approach this? And so have the citizens and stakeholders in the community give us some advice before we start going down the path of coming up with ideas ourselves.
I did get that buy-in.
You know, Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, exactly our thoughts on this as you all, before a lot of our times here, that was the approach that won and has given us the opportunity to fund safe routes to schools and such. And but that was the process that we had intended to go through, and so there'll be a lot of people in front of you as we work through this. But again, we need to start the recommendation is you need to start this now to prep the battlefield, so to speak, so that when it does come down for a decision, it's an easy decision as opposed to thinking about it.
Very good.
Madam President.
Commissioner Pickering.
Thank you. I would just say that I think, Ben and his team, I would like to lean on them, to develop some strategies. And I think then we can jointly work with staff on those strategies. I think having Ben and his expertise be the foundation to whatever strategy will save us time, coming up with something that might not be realistic or viable in today's environment. So that would be my only suggestion, is to make sure Ben and his team they're the ones that provide the initial recommendations, and then staff and the commission review those.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions or comments? Director Wong, did you have more to say?
You've got a couple minutes.
We'll have, okay. Thank you. 3 to be exact, I think.
Madam President, Commissioners, good evening again. It's now 5:30.
All right, thank you very much, Director Wong. We'll go ahead and get started with our pre-commission agenda. First, before we go into the agenda discussion, does anybody have any comments, concerns, or something they'd like to bring up, irrespective of the agenda?
I do have questions regarding a couple items on the consent agenda, if this is the right time.
Nope, we're just gonna move right to that since nobody has anything else. So we'll go ahead, Commissioner McKinney, and then Commissioner Hanson has a question as well.
Yes, Director Wong, just as a follow-up on the questions that I raised a little earlier, regarding the blue salt, is our only option to give it away? Because if we've got 7,000 tons of this salt, and as I do the math, at $62 a ton, we're looking at about $430,000 worth of salt. And if we're only giving it away at a rate of about, it looks like 300 tons a year, it's gonna take us over 20 years to offload it. Could we not sell it to some of these other entities and get it all done in 1 year and be done with it?
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, as I said earlier in your first questions series, great questions. I would, right to the point, no, and such. And the reason I say that, less than a great position with the public from a public perspective, if we put on the market something that you have determined that we probably shouldn't be using in Ada County around waterways, those sort of things. So we're very happy that on your agenda going forward, both the Idaho Guard and the Ada County Commissioners have asked to be able to use that. And in front of you on tonight's agenda will be our recommended requirements and rules of engagement that do a couple things. First off, ensure that the district is well protected. Number two, that the agencies that have asked us have no impact on the waterways here. Both Ada County landfill and Gowan have self-contained systems that are off outside of ours, so there's no issue there. But I just, from my perspective only, it's a commission decision, of course. I don't think it would be in the district's best interest to publicly say we have blue dyed salt for sale. What we have said is that we have this supply. If you're interested, then we're more than happy to have a conversation and then go from there and then bring that to you for your determination. But you're right. I think that Jennifer's calculations were sort of close to yours. I believe that if we have the continued requests over time, it's probably 9 to 10 years that we'll finally remove all that, depending upon we have more people asking and such. But at this point, I appreciate the fiscal concerns that we all have, but I don't know if you want to get in the business of just saying we have blue salt for sale. That's personal opinion. But again, if the commission wants to do that,
okay.
Well, he has a legal point on it. So.
Yeah, thank you, Director Wong. Mr. Price, since we discontinued using that for certain reasons, could you speak to the purpose that this salt will be used for, so that we know it's not counterintuitive for the reasons that we discontinued using it?
Yeah. Thank you, Madam President, Commissioners. For the record, Steve Price. One thing to kind of just start off with is under Idaho law, statutory provision that in terms of both real property and personal property, that we can transfer property without compensation. And part of that is kind of cooperative governmental entities helping each other out when they have excess equipment or the like. So the public policy behind that statute really encourages governmental entities to share their resources if they have no value to the entity giving them away. So that's the basis that we do it. Now, in terms of the Ada County landfill, we have a remarkable agreement with the Ada County landfill to dispose our sweeper waste. and it's a huge savings to the district. And we have an agreement with Ada County to help them when they need. For instance, the fairgrounds will do street painting around the fairgrounds before a fair. We'll do sometimes they allow us to use their facility for our truck training or CDL driver training. So we have always had this kind of soft agreement where we will work cooperatively in exchanging things. They need the blue salt for the paved road that goes up to the landfill. And before the director was very concerned about the DEQ's concern about the blue dye. And we appropriately let the Ada County Commissioners know. We just want you to know, we sent news clippings and gave them a heads up that this is it, and if you're gonna take it, you're gonna have to take it so that there's a waiver and you knowingly take it for what it is. They don't have the same concerns for their wastewater getting into an aquifer. As you know, landfill design has an extensive water capture around their facilities. And when I think they compared what the blue dye contaminants are compared to the other contaminants that come from a landfill, I think they felt comfortable in doing that. Now, in terms of the National Guard, we made the same disclaimer with them about it, and I think that on the base they also have similar stormwater retention facilities to deal with that. So we felt comfortable with that. But these are both facilities, or both governmental entities located within Ada County. I think if we got a call from some other governmental entity outside Ada County, we would be more concerned about the fiscal issues associated with that. So I think just initially we got a couple of requests. If we get any additional, we would probably come back to you and say, how do you feel about going Ada County? And the reason is I think Commissioner Hansen says, and that is in some ways we're all Ada County taxpayers are getting the benefit from even another entity in Ada County. And so I think that's the rationale that we would be using. Anything out of this county we would be more concerned about. But we feel very comfortable under the agreements that are before you for adoption, that we've protected the district from any regulatory concerns from the DEQ, and how that may come back to bite us. I don't think it will, and I feel comfortable that the counties and the National Guard have both looked at the stormwater concerns that may result from the blue dye salt.
Well, and let me just say, I completely understand all those issues, and truthfully, my primary concern is not the financial one, it's the time constraints because of the annual limit on how much we can do. For example, if it takes us 9 or 10 years to give away this 7,000 tons of salt, we're hopefully well before 9 or 10 years from now, we'll have the new Federal Way facility and we'll have to move it all. And I'm thinking, isn't there a way to, do this faster, even if we sell it at, half or 1/4 of what the market rate is? We can do the good for these other entities as well. Maybe some of the Canyon County highway districts want some, and we can take care of it all rather quickly instead of stringing it out over many years.
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, we will actually look into that and get back to you, but I do want to let the Commission know that we still do use some of that blue tainted salt in areas that we have coordinated with DEQ that says this is okay. They're away from waterways, and so we are using that.
Okay.
And so, good request. We will take a look.
Okay, thank you.
Good, thank you. Commissioner Hansen.
Yeah, thanks. And Director, I don't know if Dave Serdar is here or someone from his office. I have a question about item 8, which is the vacation. We're going to advertise for, I see Justin's coming up. Good quit. So I know we're going to advertise. I know in the past when we've picked up something, we probably should have caught it on the early stage just to avoid having to re-advertise the whole process. I'm reading through this. It looks like we're gonna vacate the Yankee Rock Avenue, which goes from Cuna Road essentially all the way down to Sunbeam on the right side. And in exchange, we're gonna get, this other piece, sort of, looks like it's about a quarter mile to the west, but it doesn't go all the way through. And so my take on this is that, the Yankee Rock Avenue was intended as a mid-mile collector, and that would just have a collector a little further to the west, but not if we're not getting the whole distance. So you see what I mean? Just looking at it on the map, it looks like we're exchanging whole for half. And so I just wanted to know, do we already own the other half? Maybe that's why, or some issue with Sunbeam, but I just hate to see us at a point where we lose out on a mid-mile collector. We should have them more than just every half mile, but at least in this case, we should be preserving these collector configurations.
Mr.
Madam
Lucas.
President, Commissioner Henson, thanks for the question. So this is, we're just setting the date for the
Right,
discussion.
exactly. That's why I want to raise it, so we don't
Very
spend,
fair,
we don't spend the money to if we catch it
right.
in January, we'll have to spend the money again to advertise a new.
So the green, so this is a vacation and an exchange.
Right.
And so the reason that the developer limited the exchange area for the vacation area is because then it's an even swap. The green you see, or that alignment, does not represent the entirety of that roadway, only the portion of the roadway that they are proposing for this vacation exchange. So when we bring this back to you, we'll be able to show you the entire roadway network that was approved through that development, which goes well above and beyond the green that you see on that exhibit. So I'm confident that you'll be able to see the larger picture. This just shows a very small portion, only that portion which they are proposing for the exchange. And it really is just a numbers game where they're proposing an amount for the exchange that's equal to the amount that they want to
So
vacate.
it's a little more width. It's probably the width that is the exchange. So, but I just want some assurance that we're not losing an opportunity to have a collector
And certainly,
between CUNA and
Madam
Sunbeam.
President, Commissioner Hanson, this application wouldn't do that as through the vacation exchange process. That happens through the development process. And I believe the annexation is attached there. And then there'll be another opportunity to talk about the roadway network through the platting process. So there's opportunities for that. But when we bring this back, we'll have that further
Okay,
information.
well, good. I wanted that assurance on the record just to make sure that we weren't unintentionally missing out on some important connectivity, because I know that's very important down the road.
All right, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments about the agenda? All right, hearing none. Director Wong, do you have anything additional to add?
I do.
Okay.
Stacy, would you bring up the presentation, please? And before we start, again, to Commissioner Mays and Commissioner Goldthorpe's comments earlier about being fiscally smart on everything we do, I am pleased to let you know that our overhead in the street report that you'll be getting here in the near future for 2022 was 6.2%, down from 7.4% in FY21. So again, thank you for the guidance and such. Your team's doing an incredible job. Excuse me. Next slide, please, Stacy. Commissioners, about 3 weeks ago, I was in front of you and I shared the focus, operational focus going into 2023, and that was accelerate innovation or lose. I shared with you the four major aspects of what my intent was in speaking with our team and moving forward. Of course, the first one was distributed decision-making at the lowest level. Second, how do we become more adaptive? How do we become more flexible? Third one was, how do we change our culture to push through failure to get to success by embracing experimentation and more risk in adopting new ideas as we implement them here with your concurrence in Ada County? And finally, excuse me, partnerships, maintaining the ones we have, but exploring and expanding new partnerships in organizations with artificial intelligence, organizations that may be doing something in a different arena that we can benchmark here in the Ada County Highway District to improve and enhance operations and effectiveness across the board. So, what we did, our deputy directors were charged to answer that, their specific directorates, and I'd like to share with you now what we will be pursuing in FY21. Next one, please. And I'll start with HR. HR has several initiatives moving forward, but I wanted to start with the key one in my mind, and that's multi-capable teams. I shared that concept with you earlier, and the intent is, how do we ensure legal, statutory, compensation-wise actions when we multitask, multi-train our team members to be able to be more flexible and responsive in these very interesting times we're in and the very interesting times we're going to be in. You can see the different focuses that HR will be looking at, and I want to let you know under the concept of lead, follow, or get the hell out of the way. Stacy is standing up as the first experiment, and this is she will now every Thursday be rotating through the different divisions to understand what they're doing and provide support for them. This last week, she was already in HR, and will continue to do that to build her administrative and leadership background so that she can, when circumstances require, be immediate fit. That's that multitask, multi-rolled team member that I'm looking for all of our divisions moving forward. Next slide, please. HR will also be looking at how do we reimagine, reignite in-house training. For Commissioners Hanson, May, and Goldthorpe, as you know, years ago, not too many years ago, we stood up Leadership ACHD. COVID hit. We had to suspend that and such. We'll be reinvigorating that across the board and looking at those key areas of how do we, again, accelerate and energize in-house training to produce a better team member that is more capable and has better opportunities for leadership roles going forward. Next slide, please. Also for HR, our HR information system needs updating. It does not interact with all the systems we have going forward now. So that's another initiative as we reimagine how that works here in the Ada County Highway District, and we'll be briefing you on those as we get better at it. Next slide, please. And then we need to reimagine the interview process. Times are different. People are different. Cultures are different. Things that people hold important are different across the board. Do we have a great process? Absolutely. Matter of fact, next Monday, we're bringing on 4 new people on our onboarding process across the board. But there are different techniques and different ways that we need to understand about. There may be better ways to interview people to get them on board and excite them earlier than later in the operation. HR will be taking that lead. Next slide, please. For communications, as you know, we have the world's greatest communication team on the planet, and so they're going to start reimagining how TELUS works. We need to improve the flow process for TELUS. I mean, it works great now. As you know, we provide you a 94%, 92% response rate within 1 week, and then a little lower over 2 weeks. We can do better. And we're going to look at how we can leverage technology and improve the aspects of questions that are asked and responses to give you all a better insight and a quicker insight of where we are and what our customers are telling us. Next slide, please. We also want to transform our social event permit process again to make it easier, not only for people who are wanting to hold these things, but all of our partner agencies. Because in today's environment, if you're going to do a special event, you have to go through a lot of hoops with a lot of different agencies to make this happen. Well, under Accelerate Innovation or Lose, we believe there is a way forward that we can make this simpler, easier, more effective, and more customer friendly for people that want to participate in special event operations. Next slide, please. For communications again, traffic investigations, as I share with you on a monthly basis, We do thousands of these things across the board. And it is customer intense. It is, and sometimes it's not customer friendly on wanting to do mitigation aspects. We've got this long checklist of things that have to go through. I think our communications team will be able to streamline that and make it, again, easier, more effective, and more efficient for customers and the district overall. Next slide, please. And then media training. We've been already doing this. We are going to really gear up as we get into this year. A lot more aggressive, especially with the new legislature coming in on board and all of the increase in tasks that we're seeing. We think this is very, very important to form a collaborative perspective on what the commission, what the district says, what it doesn't say, and how we do it. And again, better support the customers so that we as an organization are less hesitant to engage not only the media, but a lot of our partner agencies when it comes down to media operations. Next slide. Again, and then finally, for our communications team, you may have already seen it, Chippy is back and such. And so we believe that as our communications teams gets a better understanding, and they have a great one now, of operations, staff, all the different things we do, this will provide them a more enhanced opportunity, an insightful opportunity to share ACHD's mission, vision, comments, and of course the commissions as we move forward. And it builds trust internally when our communications team walks into an operation. Next slide, please. Maintenance. Maintenance, we are going to create a Tiger think tank to explore new technologies and automation and such. Next week, Jennifer and her team will be demonstrating a process where one individual will be able to control multiple machines at one time. We'll see how this works out, but bottom line, there's a lot of new ideas out there. And for us to, of course, accelerate innovation, we have to know and experiment what those innovations are and the new technology and how we can implement them here into the Ada County Highway District to, again, do a couple things: make us more flexible, quicker, more effective, more efficient, and less costly going forward. So this is huge. It's a lot to bite off. We'll see how we do. Next slide. Also on maintenance, this is something we have not done, and that's to reach out to all of our other partner agencies and agencies that may not be partners in the maintenance world and share ideas and build relationships to see how we, not just with ITD, but with all cities, all operations that have maintenance things, to see how do we share these things and how do we better work as a team organization when it comes down to the very tough issues of preventive maintenance, expansion, building, operations, snow, flooding, you name it, across the board. There are some great ideas out there that we need to benchmark from. Next slide, please. And then we're going to reimagine how we do training and such, both internal and external. With the challenges that we have and will continue to have when it comes down to staffing and, again, new equipment, there are better ways. And so we are going to work hard to move out of the current culture that we have, which is great, by the way, but the same token, to embrace, again, different concepts, different training things. The groups we're getting are different, have different values. It's not good or bad, they're just different. And so if we don't adapt to that, we're going to lose out when it's all said and done. Next slide. Development and technical services. This is huge. Ryan and his group are going to stand up a rapid project implementation team from internal existing resources. We're not coming to the commission and asking for more people on this. This is all about, again, reimagining how we do business in the Ada County Highway District. And we think we can focus this team to better and more quickly respond to, from an operationally, not from a planning or a long-term projects perspective, but on the ground, there's something here. How do we respond quicker and more effectively across the board for safety, accessibility, ADA requirements, you name it, across the board. Again, this will not be a huge, we're building 35 miles of road sort of thing. This is issues that come up, and then we, in Development Technical Services, can more expeditiously answer the call and address the situation than in today's environment. Next slide, please. Cross-training strategy. Ryan and team are doing a tremendous job on this. This goes back to the multi-rolled, multi-tasked individual. And what they are doing right now is taking individuals within their own team, and they're going to enhance this and showing them the different avenues of what D&TS does, so that we can take this person and put this person here and to supplement this team as needed, or this team and move it to here to supplement that, so we aren't roadblocking applications coming in, development requests coming in, you name it. And as you know, we use the term workload surges. Well, we're constantly in a workload surge, but that being said, we believe that this will be beneficial not only to our team members at DT&S, but also to the district and our customers across the board as we mature this. Next slide. DT&S are going to reimagine their role in the project team. As I think Commissioner Hanson and Commissioner Goldthorpe, when we first stood up project teams, this was different. We were very siloed and such. When we had engineers over here and designers over here, and now we have, under Diane Bevan's leadership, and of course Justin's and stuff, project teams that are composite to the entire organization. Well, there may be a different way. There may be a better way. And there may be a way that we can minimize the staff back and forth when it comes down to projects. I think this will be an excellent opportunity to just test the parameters and the envelope of the Ada County Highway District. Next slide, please. For plans and projects, we're going to reimagine the entire project team and such. As I said earlier, we stood this up about 7-8 years ago and such, and we really haven't had a major tweak or review or evaluation of that since then. Well, FY23 is now that as we look forward. Under Justin's leadership, they're going to accomplish all those, and we'll see how this moves forward. I'm very confident it'll be a huge success, and I'm also confident there'll be some hiccups as we go forward to this, but again, we'll work through that. Next slide, please. Scoping process. As you all know, it has evolved and such. I can remember one of the scoping sessions where Brooke Green was on the sidewalk with a bunch of Slurpees and a bunch of people just going, it's a great job, they're doing it, and we did great stuff. In recent years, the commission has asked us to do more scoping for community programs and different things across the board, which we've accelerated and done. But at the end of the day, we're going to kind of take this apart, put it back together again, and see if there is a way, and I believe there is, that we can better produce scoping projects at a quicker pace with a little bit more detail and specificity as we move forward. This, again, will be a big deal. Next slide, please. And then consultant education. We're going to work with our consultants and empower them to do more so that we can provide a quicker response to our customers who are putting development applications in or design applications across the board. And so in a nutshell, what we're actually doing is multiplying the staff here at ACHD as we empower our consultants to do more than they're doing right now. This will be a challenge because at the end of the day, we sign and you approve. And so we have to ensure that all of the standards that we have set forth are met. And again, I'm confident this will be a success when we work through it. Next slide, please. And then I'd like to share with you just a little tidbit. I hope I'm not speeding too much from Justin and Jennifer and Ryan, but I want you to let you know we're going to stand up ACHD's new mobility and access coordinating team. As you know, we have ADA coordinator, and we have inspectors, and we have the planners, and it's all sort of like this. Well, we truly believe that if we are within the resources we have going forward, as we consolidate these teams, these groups of individuals under one banner, we believe will greatly enhance our opportunities to expeditiously respond and react and provide support for mobility and access for all individuals across the board and such. Rollout, I believe, January, February timeframe to start. But again, this is a true change from the current concept of operations here at the Ada County Highway District. Next slide, Stacy. So, commissioners, I know that was a just fire hose approach. There is a lot of moving parts on this. As you can tell, this is a huge undertaking. It will not be done within a month. I'm talking the entire year, FY 23, as we work through the pluses, the minuses, and get this right. But again, I truly believe, we truly believe that under that auspice of accelerated innovation or lose, these benchmarks that all of your divisions have ponied up to are going to be incredibly beneficial, not only to the Ada County Highway District, but to our partners and all of our customers across the board. And we're committed to making it work. And the only thing I ask for is your patience and your sense of humor. And so, commissioners, that is my director's report for today. I'm sorry I went a minute over, but this is a big deal, and we're very excited.
This is a big deal. Commissioners, any questions or comments before we start? No? All right, thank you very much.
You're on.
Go ahead. Go ahead and stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. We have chairs up front too, if you'd like to come on up. You don't have to stand in the back. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you very much. It's good to see a full house tonight. Thank you all for braving the cold and coming out and joining us. First item on our agenda is to adopt it. Is there a motion?
Yes, so moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a commissioner or a citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. All consent agenda items are commission action items unless noted. Do we have a motion?
Madam President, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. All right, then that will take us right down to our regular agenda. First item on that is a public hearing for the Collister Drive, State Street, Hill Road concept study. This is a request for adoption. I will go ahead and open the public hearing and we will welcome Ms. Brooke Green. We made it to this point.
It has been a while.
It's been a
It has
while.
been a while. So good evening, Madam President and Commissioners. Senior Transportation Planner within Projects and Planning. Privileged to be before you. I am here to present in consideration the adoption of Hollister concept study. In the presentation before you, I'll be the process we undertook in the past year to get us to this point, highlight a couple of goals. In addition to that, highlight the team recommendation for your consideration for adoption. But before I do that, I'd like to go over a couple goals this project when it originally started off over a year ago. First goal was to improve corridor functionality for all users, including increased ADA compliance, as well as multimodal transportation. The goal was to create a concept study that supports the already adopted Northwest Boise Neighborhood Plan. In addition to that, the 2018 Roadways to Bikeways Addendum. And lastly, a concept that acknowledges not only the ideas and the concerns expressed by the residents, but also the users of the Collister area. To quickly go over the planning area is Collister Drive no further north than Hill Road, no further south than State Street. I do want to highlight a couple of tractors and some existing conditions along this corridor. Collister is a residential collector. The speed limit is posted at 30 miles per hour. Our current conditions is 2 lanes that are 11 feet in width. Our shoulder width throughout the corridor is 4 to approximately 12 feet. I do want to highlight the right-of-way widths do vary throughout the corridor, anywhere from approximately 60 to 90 feet. And lastly, in 2019, ACHD did conduct, at the request of the property owners, a traffic analysis, primarily to address speeding along the corridor, and did conclude that traffic mitigation efforts were warranted and thus were folded into this project. I do also want to highlight a couple of tractors along this corridor that did allow us to spend a little bit more time and depth going into this. I do want to bring your attention to the northern portion of Collister, where you see several attractors regarding more or less trails into the foothill. In the center of it, you've got Collister Elementary School, and to the south off of State Street, you have got the existing library as well as the Collister Shopping Center. So bike and pedestrian enhancements along this corridor is to ensure access to many of these attractors along the area. ACHD, as I highlighted, we've been at this for a little over a year. We kicked off this project in 2021 with initial survey. It was primarily asking the users and residents along the area, what is important to you? What is your vision for your neighborhood street? We did engage in that survey in June of 2021, inviting them to share their thoughts. We revisited with them back in 2021, December, where we brought 3 alternatives for consideration. We asked, with those 3 alternatives, which one is your preferred one? Which one does provide the enhancements necessary for you to navigate this area comfortably as a bike and pedestrian? However, it was also at that time, it became incredibly apparent through that outreach effort, tree canopy was incredibly important. And we as a team concluded, let's press pause. Let's spend the duration of February through March of 2022 looking along the corridor and looking at the tree canopy. What types of efforts and mitigation efforts can we put forward to minimize the tree impacts? And so we did take a survey out and we looked at the diameter of the tree, how large, how mature, what type of enhancements or mitigations on our concepts can we make to actually limit the impact of trees. Thus, in August and September 2022, we revisited 2 of the leading concepts, went back to the public, asked for additional feedback. We included some mitigation efforts to minimize the impacts of the trees, and I stand before you December 2022 to consider adoption. I do want to highlight a couple outreach efforts that we did conduct throughout this whole year. We did do several in-person actually visits with property owners. I did visit with several along the corridor. In addition to that, we did do door hangers. We did have special meetings with the executive team of the neighborhood association. We also asked in all of our surveys, are you a Collister resident or are you a user of Collister? It was important to us to find out, what do the residents believe is important to them? Because when they step out their front door, in reality, it is their neighborhood street. And so we wanted to ensure we addressed that throughout all of our outreach efforts. So in winter 2021, as I highlighted, we took 3 concepts to the public. Your first concept, with a footprint of approximately 51 feet. It had on-street bike facilities for southbound riders, raised bike lanes for northbound cyclists, and a sidewalk. Concept 1, after we concluded the outreach, received the least support from the public. Primarily, it had to do with the on-street bike facilities, and folks did not necessarily feel the level of protection afforded to their folks navigating this space. And thus, concept 1 was eliminated for consideration. Concept 2 and concept 3. Concept number 2 has a footprint of approximately 45 feet with a multi-use pathway on one side and parking only on the west side. Concept 3 was actually, again, the largest footprint. It included sidewalk on the east side, on-street parking on the west, 2 travel lanes, a buffer space, and a multi-use pathway. So concept 3 essentially has 2 pedestrian facilities on the east and the west side. Concept 2 and concept 3, as I mentioned, we did take forward. It was at that time we did the evaluation on the tree canopy. I'll highlight that here before you. So concept 2 and concept 3, starting with concept 2, in that spring months when we did go out to take a look at can we make some modifications to lessen the impacts of trees? When we brought forward the concept originally, we had 41 trees impacted. Some mitigation efforts, now in the following slides, I'll go over that. But based off our mitigation efforts, we were able to save approximately 24. For concept 3, which is the largest footprint, originally we had 57 trees potentially impacted. Again, some of those modifications, we were able to save 28. Our tree analysis impact, we looked along the corridor and said, can we eliminate some parking in some areas for a small section so we can save some trees? Can we look to reducing the multi-use pathway requirement of a 3-foot buffer in some locations from 1 to 3 feet in minimum? And can we reduce the multi-use pathway? We reduced it from 11 to 10. Yes, a foot actually bought us some opportunity to preserve some trees along the corridor. In summer of 2022, we went back out to the public based off of those modifications and presented concept 2 and concept 3. Just a couple highlights, I won't go over all of them, but what are some of the things in concept 2 that folks liked? They appreciated the multi-use pathway. They also appreciated that it had the smallest footprint. Some things that they didn't necessarily like. They didn't appreciate the fact that there was only pedestrian facilities on one side, whether concept 3 has pedestrian facilities on both sides. They also were concerned about potential conflicts between cyclists and pedestrians navigating on that shared space. For concept 3, some of the things that folks appreciated was it provided some more versatility amongst users. You could use the sidewalk on one side or multi-use pathway on the other, but it provided for additional space for folks navigating through this area. Some of the concern, however, it's the largest footprint. And so we certainly heard that throughout the survey process. So public outreach number 2, this is what we took back out following all those modifications that we highlighted. We had 58% of those who participated in the process prefer concept 3. Something to note, I highlighted that we really did ask those who reside on Collister, what is your preference? You're gonna see a dead tie. Some residents wanted concept 2, which is that smallest footprint. Some residents wanted concept 3, which is the largest footprint. But what we did here is they want to see something. They want pedestrian facilities along the corridor. And then you had some residents who were not interested in either. Jason Street residents, you're gonna see the breakdown. Several of them did appreciate concept 3. But overall, what we heard from the public is that concept 3 was the preferred alternative moving forward. As a result, concept 3 is the team recommendation based off of public feedback and based off of technical analysis and based off of the pedestrian facilities it provides for this area. I'm going to quickly just highlight this, but I'm going to walk you through concept 3 and highlight some areas where we made some modifications so we can lessen the tree impacts. But what you see before you is the recommendation from the team. Collister Drive from John's Landing to Hill Road, you're going to see a inside a multi-use pathway. There is one area along Collister where there is that front on housing, and as a result, we were able to actually put in the suggestion of a multi-use pathway on both sides, and that is from Catalpa to John's Landing. I also want to take this opportunity to highlight why that's important. That is the location of the Northwest Boise Bikeway throughout the north end. And so what this enables folks to do is come out of John's Landing, get onto that multi-use pathway, navigate to Collister, use an RFP to get across the street and head on Northwest Boise Northwest Bikeway. So this does help facilitate folks navigating as a cyclist through this corridor. Some areas I want to highlight. So this is Collister and we're going to go north. I'm just going to highlight a couple locations where we applied some of those mitigating strategies to lessen the impacts to trees. So this is Collister going north, starting there approximately State Street. You don't see the enhancements there at the State Street intersection, but what you see right here is that RRFB that enables folks to cross safely, to get across Collister to actually get to the existing condition, which is on-street bike facilities at this location. But more importantly, what you see there highlighted in yellow, that circle in yellow, shows where there's a property where we removed parking to be able to preserve 3 mature trees. We did look to, when we talked about removal of parking, we did look to areas where there was adjacent site that folks could park on, or where we felt that there was plenty of parking available across the street. So at this location, we made the recommendation to remove parking to ensure that those 3 mature trees can stay there on that property. Moving further north along the corridor, I want to highlight to the left of the screen on the bottom left, a circle there. This is where we made the recommendation to reduce the buffer of the multi-use pathway. The standard practice is 3 feet. At this location, we made a suggestion to reduce it to 1. Primarily, it's because there's 17 trees on this property. We believe by reducing to that 1 foot buffer space, we were able to provide more ample space for those trees and the tree roots. And thus, this is a recommendation at that one property. You'll see us carry that forward to the northern portion up by Hill Road. And this is just one example of one particular property. This property has a very large mature tree out front. Again, at that location, can we reduce that buffer from 3 to 1 foot and be able to provide for ample space for the tree roots? The reality is when we come to design, we're going to have these conversations one-on-one with property owners throughout the corridor and look for opportunities to mitigate the tree impacts and the property impacts. We do believe that what we are putting forward within this plan enables the next team to take this project forward to be able to have those discussions with the appropriate property owners. This whole project in its entirety, and this does include reconstruction, is $7.1 million. Design being $850,000, construction being approximately 5.6, and right-of-way being about $605,000. With that, the team makes a recommendation forward before you this evening is to adopt concept number 3. The team also recognizes this has been a very long process, a very robust process, engaging with the property owners, engaging with the community. The project before you does provide for ample pedestrian and bike facilities along the whole corridor, and we are comfortable making this recommendation before you this evening. With that, this concludes my presentation. I stand for questions.
Thank you very much, Brooke.
Madam
Commissioners,
President?
any questions or comments? Commissioner Goldthorpe.
Yeah, just, in the last couple of weeks, we've received several communications from neighbors, members of the public in that area, with suggestions that I think are probably suited for the design phase. And so my question to you has to do with this concept study being approved really has nothing to do with what's going to wind up absolutely happening during the construction phase, and that there's plenty of time during the design phase for these other aspects to be discussed, decided on, and it doesn't have to happen tonight, correct?
Madam President and Commissioner Goldthorpe, there is a second phase to this, and that is the design phase, where we do invite property owners in the community back to the table to help us kind of address more of the nuances pertaining to, you know, what elements of the buffer space, what does that property potentially impact, some issues pertaining to drainage. Those are all elements that we discuss, and we actually get into more depth in design. Primarily because in design, we also do a lot of our survey work. And so that gives us a clearer picture of the space in which we're working within. But as I highlighted, we have approximately 60 to 90 feet of right-of-way the whole corridor. Your largest footprint is approximately 50 to 53 feet. So not knowing specifically what they're asking, there is another opportunity for the public to participate and the residents along the corridor to participate in design. And a lot of our elements we do hold off. Before you tonight is a high-level concept.
Right.
It's the process we went through with our public that says, is this addressing the concerns for bike ped? Do we have enough space to address it and put forward these elements? Will we have right-of-way impacts throughout this? Yes. Will we have that discussion and design? Yes. Will we have survey work? Yes. Those are all elements that will fold over into the next phase of this project, should this get adopted this evening.
So did you not get some of those emails that we did?
Madam President, Commissioner Goldthorpe, I got several emails. I'm just not sure which.
Okay, one had 8 or 10 different suggestions on it, and that's the one that I was most concerned about that be addressed during the design phase.
Madam President, Commissioner Goldthorpe, I can certainly reflect back on those emails and figure out which one that was, but I did see several concerning about driveway approaches. I've seen them about mailboxes, about trash cans.
Yeah.
Those are all elements that, as we move this project forward into fruition, we can address those in design. More specifically, we can address it with the property owners as we address kind of what the nuances are pertaining to specifics on the project.
Perfect.
Very good. Any other questions or comments before we do the?
Madam President, thank you. And Brooke, this is really good. And just the way in which you've described it is, I think it's consistent with what the director has talked about, is about re-envisioning how we approach these things. Is the way you described it is that it's a lot of the residents are co-creating the concept and will be co-creating the design, which will affect the property that they're on as well as the safety without compromising the safety or the mobility of all modes. And so that's really good. And I hope we see that in a lot more. I do have a couple questions. I know there's a couple people here to testify, but I do want to clarify. On the two segments where we have the attached sidewalks between states, because we're reserving parking on the west side, between State Street and Catalpa, and then between Johns Landing and Hill Road. You mark down on the chart that it's LTS 2. And whereas on the other side of the road, it's LTS 1, level of traffic stress 1. So presumably because it's close to the travel lane, that's where you do it. Is there a way, it seems to me there is a way, instead of just a long strip of potential parking, that you actually designate with a few chicanes where parking is expected, and a few small chicanes would help to then also define and perhaps increase the possibility of this being LTS 1. On those two segments where we have the sidewalk is down indicated as LTS 2, I was thinking, I'll bet we could get it to LTS 1. The other, of course, is that we aren't just about preserving existing trees. We also want to provide opportunities in the future for people to plant trees, because trees not just provide a tree canopy, they are, to me, even more important, a vertical element that draws the attention of the driver to the context of where they're driving. And they are a factor that goes into moving the performance measure to a better LTS.
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson. So the concept before you does have the highest level of protection afforded to pedestrians, being it a sidewalk or a multi-use pathway. The LTS, or certainly we can look at that if we are not achieving a 6-foot sidewalk is certainly a vertical element. It is certainly raised. It is the highest level of protection without having to be detached, but we have limited space. And so while I recognize maybe address some of the LTS, achieving a higher LTS score with chicanes, we can look at that in design. What is before you is several traffic calming measures along the corridor with some appropriate bulb outs in some locations, as well as the 6-foot sidewalk and the multi-use pathway.
Yeah.
Yes, if we don't achieve an LTS 1, we certainly can look to what elements in design may help us get there.
Yeah, I'm just impressed with those areas like on Cascia and on 36th Street over here, where we have designated this is the parking area, and then there's a short area, maybe 3 feet, where it's not parking. It extends it's a chicane. So it doesn't take additional right-of-way. It doesn't widen it anymore. But what it does is it helps define what the travel lane is. And the reason people don't park there is right now is because people tend to speed and they don't want to leave their vehicles out there. But once we've calmed traffic, maybe they'll park there. I hope they don't park their RVs out there. But I don't want us to eliminate the possibility of, instead of one super long stretch of parking that may or may not get used, we actually show a few places where it's designated. And a lot of times people do not like to have people parking right up to the edge of their driveway. Well, that's a perfect place for a chicane. And we're going to see that on Kootenai. So I would suggest a chicane along those long stretches where the chart, the attached thing said, because it's an attached sidewalk on this collector, that it does reach LTS 2 instead of 1. I did wonder if it's a design thing or whether we should put it in the concept, and that is where those sidewalks then transition to multi-use path also seems to be where the bus stops are. The bus stops at Catalpa, at Johns Landing. And there's also a bus stop at Shirley, but especially at Catalpa and Johns Landing, those are transition places, so you can anticipate people getting off the bus and crossing the street, or crossing the street to get on the bus. Would be considering the design a raised intersection, especially a raised intersection at Catalpa where it almost aligns, or at least a raised path, crosswalk, to help really designate this is where the transition is happening to the multi-use path on the other side of the street. And it's also a place we can anticipate quite a bit of pedestrian and people in wheelchairs crossing. And so that might add to it. Is it part of the concept, or is it part of a future design to say we want these crosswalks raised?
Madam President and Commissioner Hanson, we did not evaluate anything along Hollister for raised intersections. One element that we have to take into consideration is we have an existing drainage needs that through this whole corridor we're going to have to address. Raised intersections were not part of the concept for that very reason, because we recognize that we're going to have to address containing the drainage and the stormwater. If at the request of the commission at design, that is something they'd like to look into, it's certainly something that we can explore. But at concept phase, any additional raised elements across Hollister were not in consideration. We did put in bulb outs to help mitigate those traffic calming measures, and we have been in conversations with Valley Regional Transit about their needs pertaining to their bus locations along the corridor and the appropriate landing pad that they have for their people who use the transit services.
Yeah. Good. Well, I appreciate that the bus stops are there. I would ask that because we don't know, since they weren't scoped, we don't know if drainage is an issue. And my frustration is way too often things get eliminated from design consideration because the assumption is we can't deal with the drainage, but I think we can. And so I would ask that especially at these two key points, bus stops and a transition where the multi-use path ends and it becomes a sidewalk, that those be raised. And I would ask that be included in the follow-up, that we do look into the design and then come back to us and say, okay, it's going to add this cost because we would have to make some adjustments to drainage. But since we didn't scope it, we don't know whether there's a drainage issue. I would ask that we do that, that we would have at least those two areas have raised crosswalks.
Take a look at it.
I have another question on.
Okay, I think she had something to add here. Ms.
Madam
Green.
President, Commissioner Hanson, ACHD in previous years had gone out to address drainage concerns and stormwater retention along Hollister because of actually the stormwater coming off of the hill itself. Certainly, that is some elements that we can take into consideration, but drainage has been addressed on Hollister in previous efforts. Should we make any modifications to the roadway, drainage is going to have to be addressed again.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think when you're dealing with human safety, we can deal with drainage. Drainage can be we can figure it out. We're smart. I was concerned that the references to rolled curbs in some segment along the way. And a rolled curb is something that's easily mountable by a vehicle as opposed to a vertical curb. Is there a reason why we have a rolled curb there when it doesn't seem to be a reason for it? Why not have a regular vertical curb?
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, so the rolled curb pertains primarily to the multi-use pathway, and it's because of the number of driveway aprons that are going to be along that corridor for people to access their driveways. Now, the rolled curb is to help facilitate that movement into their driveways. At design, some of those elements can be addressed pertaining, do we want a vertical or do we want the rolled? But it is suggested, because the number of driveways that we're having to accommodate and access to people's property on the east segment, that a rolled curb is appropriate facility treatment.
So I appreciate that tremendously. What I see in some of these neighborhoods where rather than just at the driveway, they do a rolled curb along the entire street, which makes the facility, the pedestrian or bicycle facility adjacent to it, feel less safe, especially if a car can easily mount it. It's very hard, it's much more difficult to mount. So to the extent that it's not at a driveway, that we should have a vertical curb. So I would ask that. On the concept pictures, I noticed that it said it shows the green on the very first, the photo, the next page, following one that shows by State Street, it suggested there's green paint. Do we have green paint that takes that bike lane on the new area where we've realigned Hollister?
Pardon me. Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, just so I can orient myself, are you speaking primarily to the State Street intersection transition points?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Right
here.
here? yes.
Here, see, so on this one, it shows it's been painted green.
Looks green.
But is it actually green as it continues on? Because didn't think it was painted green.
Madam President, Commissioner Hanson,
Will we
the,
be?
the intent of that green is to be able to show not only the conflict points, but how to navigate through that. This is the location where we're switching from a multi-use pathway to
Right.
on-street bike facilities. This is a suggestion. That is a design element that would take into consideration amongst the technical team to be able to help facilitate folks being able to navigate to the existing conditions already in place at that intersection.
So I would hope as part of this project, then we would continue the green all the way across State Street. Because that's a bike facility, that we're encouraging people to use. And so to the extent drivers need to be alerted, this is a significant bike facility. I would do that. The last question I have has to do with the extending the detached the sidewalk just a little bit to Maplewood. And was the request to have that on John's Landing or on Hill Road? I couldn't remember. Was it to Maplewood to continue on so that they can walk to school? I think someone may be testifying to that.
Madam President and Commissioner Hanson, so the first location where we have a gap of sidewalk and existing conditions today is on John's Landing. We do make that suggestion right there. You can note it with the box to go ahead and finish that gap of sidewalk on John's Landing. The email in particular that you're speaking to is from, and just to orient you guys, that Collister and Hill Road, there's a bus stop right there. You can kind of, I don't know if this has you can kind of see where that bus stop landing pad is. That is a gap of sidewalk, certainly at design. That's one element that we can address, that we do address that one sidewalk gap, approximately 75 feet.
That would be great, yeah.
Oh, here we go, yes.
Yeah.
So the gap of sidewalk in that email that you're speaking to
Yep.
actually has to do about right here. This is an existing landing pad for the Valley Regional Transit Services. We recognize we can bring the sidewalk to that. Based off of the feedback that we received, we can certainly finish this one last gap of sidewalk along this corridor.
That would be great. Yeah, as you know, all you need is one dangerous gap and the kids are exposed.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions before we hear from the individuals that are here tonight?
Madam President, can I ask a couple of questions? I'll try to be quick. Brooke, let me just turn to one issue that I don't think we've addressed in any of our previous discussions, and that's the vehicular travel and traffic conditions on this segment. This project is not going to increase the capacity. In fact, with our traffic calming, it's likely going to reduce the capacity of this. What's the current level of service on this section of Collister? And do we have congestion issues at our intersections during the peak hour and so on?
Madam President and Commissioner McKinney, let me just quickly look to this, and I'm going to have to pull in a help here. We are not increasing capacity. The capacity itself, I'm going to look and see if we have it in here. Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, I may have to get back to you. We are putting in traffic calming measures. Those are mitigation features, primarily for speeding.
Sure.
And because that is one of the elements that we recognize came out of the traffic analysis. The traffic capacity as of right now, give me a moment. Let's see.
You know, and I know there's a lot of members of the public who'd like to speak on this, so if that's something you want to take a few minutes while members of the public are presenting, that's fine. I'm happy to hear that later.
Thank you.
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, I do have what the average daily traffic is for this corridor.
Oh.
The average daily traffic is 4,090 vehicles south of Catalpa. North of John's Landing is about 2,526 vehicles. Pertaining to the level of service, I'm going to have to look that up for you.
Okay, that would be good. I would appreciate that, just to know where we are, because we're not, when we reduce speed on a segment, you decrease the level of service simply because you're creating congestion with slower vehicle travel through the corridor. And so I just wanted to know that we have considered, you know, what are the effects of this on the traveling public in this area. So that's my only question at the moment, so thank you.
And Madam
you.
President and Commissioner McKinney, just to give you an idea, we are currently, they're exceeding the speeds, and so our traffic mitigation is to get them to go to 30 miles per hour. The 85th percentile exceeds south of Catawba is about 36 miles per hour. So that gives you a general idea of how fast folks are going. Our mitigating efforts are really to get them back to that 30 miles per hour, which should still accommodate the volume of capacity we anticipate for this appropriate road treatment, so.
All right, thank you. Good job, Brooke. And again, impressive outreach. Really appreciate it. A lot of good information to go from. So, thank you. Then we will go ahead and hear from the public.
Yes,
And as you
first we
approach
have-
the dais, please state your name and address, and everybody will have 3 minutes, and
Yep.
Ms. Spencer will call you up.
Mr. Clancy Anderson.
Hi there. Clancy Anderson, 1518 North 18th. That's my temporary address right now. President May and commissioners, I'm actually in the process of moving into that neighborhood. Next week we close on a house on an adjacent street. And this concept study was one of the reasons why I knew that it would probably be okay to be moving out of the north end. I'm obviously moving, for myself, I'm moving 5 miles versus 2 miles commute via bike. This will help that commute, but more importantly, it'll help my son. My son will never drive. He'll probably use the bus stop. So having a raised intersection would be great to access that bus stop that's going to be 1 block away from our house. He'll also be able to go to the store at Collister. I assume that probably Collister Shopping Center may actually get a little injection with this, as all businesses do when they are situated next to a improved bike facility like this. So I do want you to vote for this. And also, like Commissioner Hanson also said, is let's put some vertical curbs in there for the barrier, especially since you're reducing the barrier or the buffer width in some areas. I think that just would make it safer, and you know, it would also, I mean, deter cars from speeding in those areas. So, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Any questions? No? All right, thank you very much.
Next on our list is Debbie Lombard Bloom.
Welcome.
Deborah Lombard Bloom, 4603 North Collister. And I brought show and tell because I was here when you guys weren't, way back when this started over 10 years ago. I just want to say that the outreach is night and day different. I've talked to Brooke on the street. I've had Tom set up for me to talk to the engineers on the street. So I just have a couple of things to talk about. Part of the drainage is because you can't see where it doesn't drain on Collister until I was talking to the engineers, and I could point out to them that we actually have a low spot where my house is. It's been flooded before, and when we had a break in the main at the top of Collister this last year, it flooded the houses because we sit low on the west side too. So that's what that drainage is about. I'm all for a raised intersection, though. I think that would be fantastic. I mostly came because I want to talk about level of service. And I think that in order to get the level of service down, we could reduce the speed to a 25, which would be like 13th, 15th, Harrison, Collister, so that you have a level of expectation of those short 1 mile streets that go from State Street to Colorado. They're all going to be 25 when you turn on that. And my most recent part of all of the stuff that I have from all of those 10 years is the article was at the forum, and I went to down at the Boise Bicycle Project, and all of the people there are in favor of reducing speeds on streets like this to a 25. So even without all of those other design things, if you reduce it to a 25, you bring the entire street down to a level of service 1, which would be what we're kind of after in our new innovations, I think. I did want to talk a little bit about the design. I don't know if now is a right time, but at least it gets it on the record. And so those chicanes in the front of my house, you would also get to add 2 trees that wouldn't be cut down. So you would have, say, 28 if you put a chicane in front of my house and you walked around a tree, 2 trees and a pond would be great, because I do have Shirley right across the street. So we do have parking. And if you can do it at the top of the street, I think that putting one at the very top of the street, because they have Maplewood right behind them, and then they have the other rest of the street, that would be great for reducing people just trying to turn really fast around that corner to come down Collister. And I think that there's probably opportunities for one more, like you were talking about. I think that that would give you a visual of you're moving into a residential street, and to go slowly, because that's what we want it to be. I'm really happy about all of this, even though I lose quite a bit of my property. That no big deal. It's not the size of Cole Road, which is what it was going to be before. It was going to be a straight shot, the size of Cole Road. Visually, it would have looked like a runway, so those 36-mile-an-hour would have been more so. So I'm very happy, and thanks to staff. So thank you, guys.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
And then I can get rid of all that.
Do you need some help with that?
No, it's built.
Next on the list, we have Mary Beth Netting.
Mary Beth Netting, 5390 North Wall Avenue, 83703. President May and members of the commission, I've lived in the Collister neighborhood for 27 years. And for 27 years, I have walked, biked, ran, taken public transit, and driven Collister. And for 27 years, I've had so many thoughts about what is needed on that street. There are so many people that use that, like Brooke Green was talking about, the library, access to the green belt, all sorts of different things happening there on the corner of Collister and State. It leads to schools and the foothills. And I see so many people walking and biking along there, and sometimes I cringe when I see them. And I've actually have pulled over on my bike a couple times to talk to kids and ask them to please move over a little bit further, because they're walking very, very close to the street, and I've been concerned that they were going to get hit. So when this project started up, I was thrilled to see it starting to take place, and I was very, very hopeful that it would happen this time. And so I either attended or listened to all of the concept study meetings that Brooke Green had with the neighborhood. I listened to the presentation that was given to the commission last week, and I really appreciate the level of engagement that Brooke Green and her team has had with the neighborhood. As a matter of fact, I saw her on Collister Street talking to one of the neighbors. So I, like Debbie Bloom, I am really happy to see this happening. I'm very happy, and I would like to ask you to consider approving this concept. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Next, we have Mark Bennett.
Welcome, Mark.
My name's Mark Bennett. I live at 3601 North Collister Drive. Lived there for 5 years. My father-in-law owned the house for probably 20 years before that. His grandparents built the house in 1955. We absolutely love Collister. And I would just like to voice my support for option 3 and thank Brooke for all of the work that she's done on this. I think it's a great plan. I know that my son had to walk to Collister Elementary and then to Hillside Junior High, and every day he walked, I was fearful for his safety. It's regular that people, I know that the predominant speed is probably 36 or the 85th percentile, but so many people are doing 40 and 45, and I think sometimes 50. I mean, it's just a really dangerous road. In front of my house, we get a lot of pedestrian traffic of people, I think, walking to the bus stop and to the Collister Shopping Center, and we get a lot of cyclists riding to the Greenbelt and other places like that. I would also like to ask that we could reduce the speed limit in the interim before this project happens if it does. And that's all I have to say.
All right.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we have Aaron Friesen. Yes. Oh.
Welcome.
Aaron Friesen, like freezing cold. I live on 5025 North Collister. So I'm right on the corner of Hill and Collister. We are in a very busy section of that street.
Activity there.
Very, yeah, absolutely. And so I'm one of those residents that, one, thinks that something should be done, but also I believe that the footprint should be smaller than what it is. I agree in reducing the speed limit. One, we live on that corner, so people coming off of Hill onto Collister don't even stop at that four-way stop, and they'll speed right past and go right by our place. So one, reducing the speed to a 25 miles an hour would be great. Second is I would like to protect more trees. I know that's one thing that a lot of us on Collister that live there would like to do. I think it helps our home values as well. But keeping trees, I think, is a big part of the things that would help us move forward with this project. I do think having a sidewalk on one side is great for those that need it. We do like to bike from our house down to Greenbelt. So a lot of what's being suggested, I'm not opposed of, but footprint, trees, and speed are the things, major things that I would like to be able to see done. The ability to help that street not look like 36, that it looks like a residential street, and that it's something that doesn't take away from our home value, in which we know that we all spent a buttload of money on our houses during this last cycle. And so one, losing land on that is something that we don't want to do. But two, when it comes to resale value, that this also doesn't hurt us that are living on this street and that are most impacted by it. So yes, I say we move forward with a lot that is suggested, but please take consideration to those that are living there that do want less of a footprint and want to keep a street looking with beautiful mature trees, looking residential as it possibly can. Cool.
Very good. Thank you very much.
We have on Zoom Tanya Ranger. Tanya, if you could turn on your microphone and camera, it's your turn to address the commission.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
We can. Welcome, Tanya.
Hi, thank you so much. So I apologize for not being able to be present. I've got a kids concert that I'm doing tonight. I would like to thank you guys for the opportunity to speak.
Could you just start with your full name and address?
It's Tanya Ranger, 4409 North Collister Drive.
All right, thank you.
So there's a couple of quick things that I wanted to share. The first is that Collister is a residential street. It does not function like 36th Street or Pierce Park or even 28th Street. All the 28th
Tanya, hold on just a minute. Tanya, we're losing you. Just a moment. If you could speak right into your microphone. We just lost you a little bit.
You know what? I'm having a little issue. Let me try to get back on.
I'm sorry.
We did also have a Tom Talley, 3655 North Collister, and he said that he didn't need to speak, but he just wanted on the record that he supported the concept.
Okay, very, very good. Did Tanya sign off? Is that what she was saying? She was going to try again? Okay. So we'll watch for her. Is there anyone else? That's it. Let's give Tanya a couple seconds here to see if she can boot back up.
In the meantime, Chris Danley just said that he would like to testify, so.
Okay. All right, go ahead, Chris. State your name and address, please.
All right, thank you. Chris Danley, 2903 East Gloucester, Boise, Idaho. Thank you, commissioners, for your service. Merry Christmas. After having reviewed the Collister project, I just wanted to say, first of all, job well done. From my professional opinion as a planner in the transportation realm, I see it as having some phenomenal assets. What I felt compelled to particularly address is this notion of level of service. Level of service is a measure of comfort. It's a mathematical formula computed by volume to capacity and is a ratio. Collister, being a 2-lane road, very likely has the capacity of approximately, give or take, about 8,000 vehicle trips per day. That's pretty common for a 2-lane road. If the volume, which is reported by Ms. Green, was approximately 4,500 a day, then that means that the history of the street, roughly 100 years old or so, is approximately reaching about 55. In other words, there's tremendous leftover capacity that still exists. So the notion of level of service is really a moot point, to the point where if that's not necessarily believed, then the next factor is it's so much not a factor that people are speeding to the point of the 85th percentile being 6 miles per hour over the posted speed limit. Beyond that, you're hearing from the neighborhoods that in fact people are regularly traveling 45 to 50 miles an hour. So congestion is clearly not a factor if people are able to speed to that point. So this project and everything that it's trying to do not only allows the street to continue to function in its intended purpose as a residential roadway and the capacity that's intended to provide and the volume that's supposed to move, but it also is going to get the speeds in a much more hospitable and livable way, which is precisely what the Livable Streets Design Guide and everything ACHD is trying to do is meaning to accomplish. Further, I would add, what about the level of service and the measure of comfort for those who are walking and biking and the people who are living on it? The project that you have in front of you delivers on so many of those points and then some. So I wholeheartedly would agree with this project, and I hope that you support it. Thank you for your service.
Okay, thank you.
Tanya,
There's Tanya.
Tanya is back.
Thank you so
Tanya.
much, you guys. I apologize.
Oh, now we can hear
service
you
isn't
really
very
well.
Okay, good. So, so I live at 4409 North Collister Drive. I've lived on the street for 10 years. I previously resided next door at 4415 North Collister Drive. And I think it's important to recognize that this is a residential street. And I think, thankfully it sounds like we're all on the same page with that. It's not meant to be a thoroughfare, right? And so I think we certainly have an issue with regard to speeding. And I think that there are certain things that we can do. I think that that's a separate issue, actually, than the sidewalks. So I've got 2 small kids. We moved in when my son was 1 year old. And I originally started how some of these other people felt like, oh my gosh, we need sidewalks. I was ready for it, wanted to do it. Then the longer that I lived on Collister, the more that I realized it's actually very safe. The shoulders are 9 foot. Where I'm at, sometimes even larger, so therefore larger than a lot of sidewalks. They are currently multi-use, and they also just produce additional parking space, right? So it currently is multi-use. What I think that we're dealing with is a perception issue, right? So the perception is that it's unsafe to pedestrians. The perception is that it's unsafe to bicyclists, when in fact that's not the case. We don't have issues like we had at the intersection of Collister and State accidents, people getting hit. If it were a safety issue, I think that this would be a different conversation. So I want to make sure that we're making decisions based on fact and not perception. There's a perception that sidewalks are progressive, but the question is, are they really, right? Is it worth $7 million and not greater pedestrian safety, not greater bicycle safety? It doesn't do what it's intended to do. So, my kids walk up and down Collister, they ride their bike up and down Collister. And the truth is sidewalks aren't going to change how I feel about them walking up and down, because the truth is, regardless of perception, it is a very safe street. I think one of the things that would be better as a residential street if we were actually lowered to 25 miles per hour. So I also sell real estate in the area. Excuse me, and I did some development on Collister myself. So I'm very well aware of the reason why people move to our area. It is historic. It has the historic feel with trees, with the vegetation. And the truth is that we are going to end up losing property, which is going to end up with trees gone. Even with the best of intentions, in talking with Brooke earlier today, we are unable to know exactly how many trees we are going to lose or save. And I promise you, if we lose the feel of this street, the value of every home on that street is going to plummet substantially, and not by $5,000 or $10,000. You know, potentially, if we end up losing most of the trees, which, you know, frankly, the best of intentions, you guys can't promise how many are going to be left after this project is over. You know, it could end up being 50,000, 75,000 in valuation down. And those are just, that's factual information. So I think had we been able to do an actual survey and seeing how much land everyone's taking, how many trees are going to go, then we could really have the information that we need to support or not support. So while there's a lot of feelings and perceptions, the facts are people's property is going to be taken more than what's anticipated. The Ada County Assessor's GIS outlines of all the exact. We have to rely on surveys for things like putting in fences, etc. Therefore, we cannot rely on a GIS to say how much land is going to be taken and assert that it's only going to be a foot or two. It's certainly not going to be only a foot or two. And in multiple areas, it's going to be 5 feet, if not 10 feet. And what ends up happening is the root ball for a lot of these trees is going to be compromised, and therefore the trees are going to be removed, right? And it's not necessarily the intention, and I want to make sure that I'm very gracious with that. I know the intention is for the best of the neighborhood, but when, you know, when it's brass tacks,
Tanya?
It's not going to happen. Yeah.
Okay, your time is up, so if you could just wrap, please.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Your final
thought? You know, I do want to make sure that I recognize that the intention is a good intention, but the way that it's going to impact the neighborhood is not going to have the positive intention that there is. So thank you guys. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my thoughts.
Okay, we appreciate you persevering and rebooting. Thank you, Tanya. Appreciate your input.
Have a great night, you guys.
All right, thank you. Ms. Green, could you, I caught the concerns about the trees, the speed limit. I think in between there, we lost a little bit. She's indicated she spoke to you earlier. So if there's something there that you could kind of fill in a little bit so that we have.
Yes, Madam President and Commissioners. So Tanya and I did speak earlier this afternoon pertaining to some of her concerns, primarily about the right-of-way impacts along the corridor. I'd like to go back to originally what I highlighted was the available public right-of-way that is already available to us. And so that varies from 60 to 90 feet. And it's because Collister is a very unique street. Over time, it has developed, and as a result, you're going to see that variation of public right-of-way. Our largest footprint is approximately 52 feet. There will be elements of right-of-way impact along the corridor. Where along the corridor and what property along the corridor that potentially could be, our survey, when we get to design, will help us make that determination. That is also why it's incredibly important at that moment. We have right-of-way agents here at ACHD on our team to have those conversations with the property owners, pertaining specifically to trees. When we went and did our survey, we looked at the diameter, and the diameter gives us a general idea of what the root structure could potentially be. Until we actually dig up the road, we really will have no clear picture of what's below it. And as a result, it's an approximate preservation of trees along the corridor with some of these modifications. Some other elements to help preserve and that the design team can consider would be permeable asphalt. It is one piece of the, you know, it doesn't dig as deep, maybe it wouldn't impact the roots. Those are all elements in design. Can I be 100% certain we're not going to impact a tree on a property until we get out there, until we do the survey work?
But it is something that can be addressed.
Yes, we're going to do the best we can to mitigate some of the things in the toolbox that we put into place. Reducing the buffer space, that's one. Reducing the parking, that's another. Those are flexibilities that we're affording our design team, should you adopt this, to be able to take into consideration, and elements that we highlighted within our plan.
Okay, very, very good. Thank you. Any other?
Yeah, Commissioner May, Colby Durango also said he didn't want to speak. He lives at 3502 Collister Drive, but he is in support of the project.
Is in support. Okay, but no one else to testify. Okay. Any other questions for Ms. Green?
No, I just want to say I appreciate that we we can borrow a foot here from the multi-use path, but we can also borrow maybe a half a foot from the travel lane in order to make that. So there is some flexibility on both sides because we have 10-foot travel lanes in many, many collectors throughout the city. So recognizing that when we borrow, we need just a little bit of extra space in order to accommodate perhaps the buffer, that it can come from either side, and actually preferably from the side that isn't using it.
All right, very good. A lot of comments about the speed, right? So the speed reduction, and I certainly see the validity there, and I would certainly be in favor of having that speed reduced. I travel Collister a lot. I've been to Debbie's, and it can turn into a speedway. So, and I know we've gotten a lot of TELUS and written requests too for the speed reduction. So I would certainly be in favor of that. And I don't know if that's something we can look at and put into place as Aaron requested during his testimony, construction date starting. So I don't know if we can take a look at that. I would be in favor of that.
Madam President,
Commissioner McKinney.
if I can just follow up, Brooke, were you able to get any information about the vehicular traffic conditions?
Madam President and Commissioner McKinney, I'm going to actually say Chris nailed that one with his testimony. We did not do a level of service analysis on this because of the available capacity. It's got significant capacity along the corridor. The biggest issue is that speed piece. Some of these efforts that we're putting forward is to mitigate. No, it's going to actually enable us to be able to ensure that we modify the roadway itself to create that friction for people to go the appropriate speed. But we did not do a level of analysis on it pertaining to the volumes because there's so much capacity along the corridor.
Okay, well, let me just say on that, I'm all in favor of efforts to make a safer corridor and reducing speeds, and this seems like a place where that's needed. But just kind of the commenter who made the comments, you say he nailed it, I disagree. Being a traffic engineer myself, he's wrong in that the theoretical maximum capacity of a road does not tell you what its level of service is because of variations during the day. So you may have only 20% capacity being used of the theoretical capacity, but if it all comes at the same time, you've got congestion. So that doesn't answer that question. And his conclusion that if speeds are high, therefore there can't be a lot of congestion, that doesn't make sense either, because there can be congestion during the peak hour and then not much during other hours when speeds can be quite high. So I just have to say that to go with those kind of pat answers doesn't quite answer the question. So I still would like to know if there is any traffic information. I imagine ACHD has done traffic studies there in the past, and we should be able to get information that at least gives us an idea of where we are and where we're likely to be in the future.
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, for this project, we did not do the analysis. It's certainly something that they can look into should this be adopted into design. Looking over through our scope of work, was it necessary? We concluded it wasn't at the time in which we conducted the concept, but it's certainly something that we can look into should that be the request of the commission.
Very good. All right, thank you very much, Brooke. Great job. Great job. I'm going to go ahead with no other individuals signed up. I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. Commissioners, you have this item before you. Do we have a motion?
Yeah, Madam President, I would move to approve the concept, and I would add a couple of little things just as we move into the design stage. One is to evaluate whether it's more appropriate to have a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. To make sure that rolled curbs are only used at driveway entrances, not generally along the road, which I think they're going to do anyway, but I just want to put that as part of it. That we look at raised crossings at the 2 bus stops, knowing we can address, as long as they address the drainage solution. So I think look at it evaluate with the drainage. So in other words, we haven't evaluated it. I'd like to see us evaluate raised crossings and drainage. And then the last is the chicanes to preserve additional trees and reach at level of service 1, which I think we can do. Some chicanes can preserve perhaps even some more trees, but also to help push level of service to one in those segments were.
So we have a
So
motion
those
with
four
four
little-
things.
Yeah, those
Right?
four little things.
Is there a second?
I'll be happy to second that.
Commissioner Goldthorpe seconds. Any further discussion?
Madam President?
Madam President?
Commissioner Pickering?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I just want to say that I want to say thank you to everyone that testified virtually and in person today. I think Commissioner Hansen's suggestions and ideas for us to explore further are corroborated by the testimony that we heard today and the need to, pinch and elevate, traffic where we can for that safety component, where it makes sense, of course, right? We don't want to, thanks Debbie for testifying and speaking about the flooding and the drainage issues, right? So obviously we always want to be context sensitive, but I think these are really great additional solutions that I hope we can explore and just build on the great work that staff have done and presented to us thus far. I'm really excited to vote in favor of this. I think this is a tremendous job well done. Brooke, thank you. Thank you, neighbors, for participating in this process. I know it's not easy. It took time, right? We hope by getting your input and your feedback so thoroughly and consistently that we will have a product in a street that you will love and feel safe on. So thank you for that. And I appreciate Commissioner Hansen's other additions that he included in his motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the motion, we have a second, four things to explore. Commissioner McKinney, you had a comment right before I went to Commissioner Pickering.
Right, I guess so, Commissioner Hansen, if I understand your, motion, it is to, approve concept 3 for this project with several conditions. And all of those seem to be design consideration requests, that it doesn't strike me as necessary as conditions of approval. I'm certainly happy to approve the project and the concept. I don't see a need to add additional conditions on it. Instead, we'll just look at those design issues as they come up once we get into the design process.
Well, that's it.
Mr. Price? Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll answer him if you want.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh,
Yes, sorry,
yeah,
Commissioner Hansen.
these are design considerations that the public has asked for very specifically, that Brooke has indicated haven't been evaluated yet, but could be. And so we would like to make sure that they are in the design process. So I think it's appropriate to say the commission intent is that, yeah, we will look at these because in fact they were raised by the neighbors.
And that's the intent of the motion, correct?
Exactly.
To take a look at those things.
Exactly. So in the design phase, we're gonna look specifically at these things and incorporate them in the design.
All right, Mr. Price.
Madam President, Commissioner McKinney, I didn't interpret his motion to include conditions other than simply requesting staff to consider those as design considerations going forward. I did want to say, Commissioner Hansen, another condition or suggestion was, no, you did actually, and I believe it was the connection between the north part of Collister to the transit
you're
stop.
right. Thank you.
You bet.
Can I add that with the consent of my second, that little piece of Hill Road?
I don't know, you
sidewalk?
buying dinner tonight? I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Price.
Pizza.
With the consent of my second, I would add that consideration, but my sense is they're gonna do it anyway, but
Okay.
All right. So
that little piece of Hill Road.
if there's no further discussion, I will go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? All right. Hearing none, motion passes. And we will go ahead and close. Well, no, we already did close the public hearing. We need to have that pizza, Jim. You can go order. Did you want to take a break or just 5-minute break? All right, we'll take a 5-minute break. Thank you. Nothing too, nothing too spicy.
That's right.
Oh. Regular.
Here.
job, Stace.
That's what I figured happened when I was looking at it. Anyway.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're ready to get started again. All right, our next item on our agenda is another public hearing, Columbia Village Neighborhood Improvement Concept Study. Again, a request for adoption, and we are going to hear from Margaret. And Margaret, please pronounce your last name for me. I don't want to.
Zealous.
Zealous. Okay, silent S. All right, welcome to you, and I will go ahead and open the public hearing.
All right, Madam President, members of the Commission, for the record, my name is Margaret Zealous, Senior Transportation Planner here at the Highway District. Before you tonight is the Columbia Village Neighborhood Improvement Concept Study for adoption consideration. As a reminder, this concept study was in front of you in late October. Edison was the one who carried it through there. Columbia Village concept identifies and recommends bicycle and pedestrian improvements along routes that were identified in the Roadway to Bikeways Master Plan and follows the guidelines set in the Livable Street Performance Measures and Southeast Boise Neighborhood Plan. The planning area limits are Boise Avenue to the north, State Highway 21 to the south, Federal Way to the west, and State Highway 21 to the east. This slide shows the planning area and imagery of the existing conditions along Holcomb Road and Lake Forest Drive. Several goals of the Columbia Village project include identifying and recommending bicycle and pedestrian improvements that align with the neighborhood vision and provide a low-stress alternative to major roadways. The recommendations were targeted at improving intersection and crossing movements to increase connectivity, accessibility, and safety for all users. These goals were supported in coordination with a robust public outreach process. The public engagement process included stakeholder meetings and 2 public involvement opportunities. The stakeholder coordination included meetings with the Neighborhood Association, the City of Boise's Parks and Recreation, and LeBois Junior High. Following commission direction from the pre-adoption, staff also met with Trailwind Elementary School. The public involvement opportunities were conducted in March and July of this year. And Commission, we had fantastic feedback at both stages of our outreach with a total of 654 comments. In response to Commission's direction, after the pre-adoption work session, staff evaluated and recommended improvements for Lake Forest Drive between Quamish Way and Highway 21 and Intercon Way. Consistent with what was presented at the work session, staff is recommending bike lanes, buffered bike lanes, sidewalks, crossing improvements, and intersection enhancements throughout Columbia Village. This slide provides a visual representation of the existing and recommended improvements at Holcomb Road, Grand Forest Drive, and Lake Forest Drive. In coordination with Trailwind Elementary School, staff recommends that Lake Forest Drive, east of Adonis Place, to the State Highway 21 be improved with buffered bike lanes and the removal of on-street parking on the east side of the roadway. This would allow us to improve for bicycle facilities on Lake Forest while still preserving the necessary parking in front of Trailwind Elementary. Consistent with this recommendation, staff is also recommending a buffered bike lane configuration for Intercon Way to connect Grand Forest Drive and Lake Forest. Consistent with the work session, staff recommends improvements at the intersection of Amity Road and Holcomb Road. The considerations for the specific intersection treatments will be thoroughly deliberated at the design phase for this intersection. Additionally, staff has received public feedback desiring bicycle and pedestrian facilities along Amity Road. Staff analysis determined that these improvements should continue to be evaluated through a dedicated concept study on Amity Road. We believe that the existing conditions and the possibilities for Amity Road provide a great opportunity for coordination with the City of Boise, their respective pathways plan, and the public to determine what will best serve the entire corridor. Continuing, the north and south Quamish Way intersections are proposed to be improved as protected T intersections with enhanced bicycle and pedestrian facilities. And finally, in response to public feedback and the Commission direction, staff is recommending 3 crossing improvements along Lake Forest Drive to provide connectivity, including at the pathway east of Hollyhock Place, Orchid Way, and Kelton Place. During the design phase, the assessments will be conducted to evaluate the best crossing treatments throughout Columbia Village, including these locations. The estimate cost for the recommended improvements is $2.2 million. As mentioned in the previous work session, the recommended improvements will be implemented in a phased approach, with elements of this concept study being implemented throughout our traffic operations, chip seal, roadway and ADA projects, and as a bikeway project in the integrated 5-year work plan. Staff recommends adoption of the Columbia Village Neighborhood Improvement Concept Study as written. I'll now stand for any comments or questions.
All right, thank you very much, Margaret. Appreciate it. Commissioners, any questions or comments for Margaret?
Madam President.
Commissioner McKinney?
Margaret, can we go back a couple of slides to where we had those roadway views? There we go, right there. Now, are these, okay, the pathway east of Hollyhock Place, Orchid Way, Kelton Place. Let me just make sure I understand the scope of this project though. Are we, because as you can see from these photographs, we've got curb gutter and sidewalk along with on-street bike lanes in this area. In a couple of places they're buffered bike lanes, in other places they're not. So would this project be tearing out those sidewalks and rebuilding them according to our new cross sections, or?
Madam President, Commissioner.
Just clarify for me.
Yeah, we will not be removing any existing facilities as a part of the phasing when we go through with some of the chip seal and roadway improvement projects. We will just chip seal and repaint the configuration to remove the parking and implement the buffered bike lanes.
Okay, so we're not proposing taking out any sidewalks or existing bike facilities. We're only adding to them. Is that a correct understanding?
Madam President, Commissioner, that is correct.
Okay, all right.
Commissioner Hanson?
Thank you, Madam President, and Margaret, thank you very much. I appreciate this. You know, the Collister project, which first started, 15 years ago or something, as a sidewalk project, and it was always sort of approached as a sidewalk project. And as Brooke and others got more and more into the neighborhood, they realized it's all about making this a livable street. And so that's why all those other things were gradually worked into it. And this, which is a much shorter time period since we've first gotten our hands on it, was approached as a bike project. We need bike connectivity. But so I'd like to see it go through the same transformation, hopefully not on as long a time frame, to make it really about livable streets. Because this development was allowed to be built umpteen years ago with these collectors, which we now wouldn't allow. So now the question is, how do we make sure that you have bike lanes that are actually safe, that you have sidewalks that are actually safe and people feel safe, and that there's crosswalks. So there's a lot of things I think that have been suggested by people, and I think we're going to hear from them today, which I'd like us to incorporate into this and think of this as, let's transform Lake Forest, Grand Forest, Quamish, especially those into a livable street redesign. I appreciate that you said we're going to phase it in. I know Kootenai was originally going to be phased, but we ended up doing it all. This is bigger and also has some other moving parts as you move off the hill. But I really do strongly support the involvement of the neighborhood and the individuals who have brought forward these issues of we need safer crossings, and it just there are things that we have to do. We don't have to tear out the sidewalks. We definitely need to make them so that people feel safe walking to them. And this not only has an elementary school right there, it has a junior high school, it has a senior facility. There are lots of kids, lots of seniors, lots of people who don't feel safe using this. And when you don't feel safe, you get in your car and you drive to the other end of the neighborhood. So anyway, I hope we're open, and I haven't quite figured out how we're going to add to make sure those things are considered, but I hope virtually everything that the next couple of people are going to testify to are incorporated into our next design phase.
They always have that opportunity during design, right, to address some additional traffic calming, et cetera. So,
Madam President, Commissioner, if I can address that as well. Staff is very confident that this study was done in coordination with the public outreach, and the concept that's brought before you today does include a number of the requests that we've received from the public in the last few weeks. A lot of those crossings that you see called out on Lake Forest Drive are in direct response and listening to the feedback that we have received. I would also like to draw your attention to the additional considerations section within this concept report, because a speed evaluation will also be conducted on Holcomb Road between Amity and Eastgate Drive when the project is implemented, and a traffic calming project, is actually programmed for Grand Forest Drive as well in 2026 as part of the roadway and ADA improvements. So staff is confident that this project has been very adaptive and reflective of the community input that we have received as well.
Very good. Thank you, Margaret. Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you.
Yes, we do have some people signed up. Mr. Mike Barnett.
Welcome.
Madam President, Commissioners, name's Mike Barnett. I live on 5338 South Paintbrush Place. I think I kind of got the squeaky wheel going back in 2019 with my vision impairment and how the lack of crosswalks are currently on Lake Forest, Quamish Way, and Grand Forest. From what I've been hearing is they're adding a few to the crosswalks to Lake Forest and maybe addressing some to Grand Forest, but I do not believe that they have assessed how much more is needed. There is currently a crosswalk ready to be painted or put in off of Mimosa and then off of Ophelia, if I remember if that's the right name of it. But I also think that Yamhill should be one of the also places that they should have a crosswalk in. As being a avid pedestrian and walks that neighborhood quite frequently, the proposed plan should be studied a little bit more before they finally make it set in stone. I think that what is currently being addressed is not wholeheartedly done. There has been too many close calls, especially over there by the Simplot field. When there is soccer going on, I have heard too many people, especially on the Nextdoor app, how my child's almost been hit, or I have almost been hit. There's just too many things going on that I think that should be addressed now and not within the next couple of years. Again, I think that they should really step back and see what it needs to be addressed more than what has just been proposed.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Any questions or comments? No? All right. Thank you very much for being here.
Mr. Patrick Reese.
Welcome back.
Thanks. It's nice to be back. Madam President, members of the Commission, I've previously submitted written comments I think that you all received yesterday.
Thank you very much.
Both via email and hand delivery. So I just want to hit the highlights of those. I'm certainly not going to go through each item within those comments. But as I look back on what I wrote, obviously they are directed primarily, in my mind at least, to issues of safety. And as I mentioned earlier, I think in October in my comments, I am really interested in the Commission considering some meaningful traffic calming throughout the subdivision, not just in certain sections, but from the beginning of Lake Forest and to the Highway 21, and from the beginning of Grand Forest to Highway 21. And as you know, they exit and enter on Highway 21. So as has occurred with Collister, I'm also asking that the Commission give serious consideration to lowering the speed limit within the subdivision as well. And I think I mentioned in my comments that I've clocked vehicles with a gun as high as 49 miles an hour on Grand Forest. Now, I don't know what the speeds are like on Lake Forest, but That's a single incident, admittedly. If you do not feel that you can lower the speed limit, there are other traffic calming devices that you can utilize that I've mentioned in my comments. The one that's most interesting to me is the possibility of speed tables, which I think were also discussed in connection with the Collister project. One thing I noticed, and if I'm reading this incorrectly, please correct me, it looks like the 10-foot drive lanes end at Quamish, coming down Highway 20, down Grand Forest from Highway 21 down the hill, and then coming from Yam Hill into that section of the subdivision. So I'm not sure why the 10-foot drive lanes have been reduced only to that point, especially with all of the activity that occurs beyond Quamish, including the LDS Church, the junior high school, Trailwind Elementary School, as well as the senior center, which is right there on Quamish. I was also puzzled by why there were no enhancements on Grand Forest. There are three rapid flashing beacons, three rapid flashing beacons, I think, on Lake Forest, along with a couple of three additional, that's my signal, I guess, three additional crosswalks. But on Grand Forest, there are no enhancements of that nature. And I guess in conclusion, I guess I'm suggesting that if we're going to do something like this, it should be a whole neighborhood plan, not just a part of it. Because quite frankly, I think if someone were to come back to you in 3 years and say, oh, we need to do something on Grand Forest, the response may well be, well, you got your bite out of the apple in 2023. Now you want more. And so I think we really need to consider doing a complete neighborhood concept plan and design rather than just the portion that's being done now. Thanks.
Very much. And thank you very much for your letter. A lot of good information, a lot of good suggestions in there. So we really appreciate that. Thank you.
Madam President.
Commissioner Pickering.
I would like to ask Margaret to respond to that. And I really would like to understand why there wasn't more to Pat's point. Why wasn't additional features and traffic calming elements included on both streets? And even if they were, it obviously gives an impression that it isn't a comprehensive neighborhood plan. So if you could respond to some of those questions and thoughts, that'd be helpful.
Madam President, Commissioner Pickering. So I would like to address a number of those points, beginning with staff is recommending 10-foot travel lanes throughout the entire corridor. And we apologize for any confusions within that. Based on the commission direction from the pre-adoption work session, we have made that adjustment for the entire study. Traffic calming elements, when we're considering that as a part of the additional consideration section, that's where we wanted to go back and make sure that with the implementation of the reduced lane width and the buffered bike lanes and the proposed crossings as well, what is the impact of that on the traffic calming as well? So we wanted to be able to go back and look at it after we've implemented some of these treatments. Additionally, we do have a traffic calming elements programmed in the 5-year work plan as a part of the roadway and ADA improvements in 2024. So they are to be designed and constructed by 26 for Grand Forest Drive from State Highway 21 to 21. So although we didn't include that include the details of that within this concept study, that is going to be looked at, incorporated with its own design as a part of that roadway and ADA improvements. And then and then the only other comment I think I have is that for the crossings along Grand Forest Drive, I would like to draw attention to the Quamish Way intersection improvements as well. The T intersection improvement includes both like highlighted pedestrian and bicycle facilities, as well as enhancing those crossings at both the north and the south intersections. There is 5 crossings that I identified along Grand Forest Drive that are existing. There is, just one second, between the Quamish Way, the Rock Rose, there's an RFB in front of Lobois Junior High and at Intercon Way, and as well at the Pepper Tree intersection. So we do have intersections identified. However, staff is receptive and will include any additional intersections or crossings at commission direction.
Thank you, Margaret.
Very much. I think Commissioner Goldthorpe has a question.
Just one comment. The more the merrier. This is one of the scariest places in this entire city. For me to have gone when my kids were playing soccer, I hated going over there. And that was 30 years ago. So thank you very much for all your efforts.
It's only grown, yeah. A lot of activities, schools, soccer field, church, 7,500 residents up there. Yeah, so there's a lot going on, so it definitely needs some attention. So thank you. Glad you're doing some additional looking into the crossings, especially in Mr. Ricci's letter, on Lake Forest and Grand Forest. It was really, really helpful going through everything and some really good suggestions here. So I would ask that we take a good hard look, and you may have already communicated back with him, but if you could follow up and give him some feedback as we go forward. Thank you. All right, Ms. Spencer?
Yes, we have one Zoom.
We'll let you sit back,
Chris
Margaret.
Danley.
All right. Go ahead, Chris.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner May and the rest of the commission. Again, Chris Danley, 2903 East Gloucester in Boise. I'm a resident of this general area and have been for almost 17 years. And I want to first just start by saying I again appreciate the hard work that's gone into this. I know staff, it's a thankless job, but has done I think in large part a bang up job. There's a few things I wanted to bring to your attention that I think are worth bringing up. One, I think I've been a pretty good boy this year for Christmas, and all I want is a roundabout at Amity. Again, knowing this world, roundabouts are a slam dunk when it comes to comparison to the traffic signal. This is a 45-mile-an-hour road. You know it's an Idaho Power easement, so there's not going to be development along most of that section. It's residential, mostly in nature, with a conversion that's likely going to continue to more residential into the future. But it's most importantly, it is an essential crossing for people getting up and down to the Greenbelt, down towards the river, and then up towards Columbia Village. So anybody trying to beat a light, trying to get over that intersection, if it were a signal, that's a complete hazard. And at 45 miles an hour, it's a death sentence. A roundabout solves that. If you're fiscally conservative minded, then a roundabout saves a tremendous amount of money in continual annual operating costs because it costs nothing. There is no electricity. There is no mast arm that's going to be taken out. So again, given the amount of land that's over there, that absolutely, in my opinion, ought to be the way to go. One quick thing on that too is remembering, and again with the future efforts, is that is intended to be a pathway all along Amity. So if it does become a roundabout, ensuring that the legs of that southern part of the roundabout allow for that pathway is something as a detail to work on and consider. My other point, and this is a tricky one, and again, I know it's an easy one to solve. I wanted to point out the cross section on Lake Forest with the 10-foot travel lanes, the 4-foot bike lane, and the 7-foot parking. As Commissioner Goldthorpe mentioned, and everybody knows with the soccer complex, that parking is incredibly busy. A 7-foot wide parking spot's probably not going to be, frankly, adequate enough. And even if it is, it's going to absolutely have many vehicles protruding into the very narrow and substandard 4-foot bike lane. When you put that next to a 10-foot travel lane, I think, have some issues. What you can do, and what's been done nationwide, is to remove the center stripe and make it a 5-foot lane. That would, in fact, make it an 18-foot wide cross section there. That is being done all around the country with good success, because when you take away those lines, you take away order. When you take away order, you get people to drive more cautiously. And that's absolutely an approved way of doing it. 9-foot travel lanes in certain circumstances is also approved by federal highways. And it's basically acting like an advisory lane, which again was adopted in 2017 in the Small Town and Rural Design Guide put out by federal highways. So you have federal backing to narrow a lane in certain circumstances, even to this point. And I think in this case, it warrants it, which would allow a 5-foot bike lane, which is a little more adequate and frankly would be used. If you want to put infrastructure in, let's get it used. And I think that that's what would help solve that. So thank you again for your service and happy holidays.
All right, thank you, Chris. That's it? All right. Margaret, did you have anything that you wanted to respond to from the, okay, all right, thank you very much. Any further questions for Margaret before I close public hearing? No?
No.
All right, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Commissioners, you have this item before you.
Madam President,
Commissioner Hanson.
I would ask that we move forward with the concept for Columbia Village and the whole bike. I'd like to call it the livable streets concept study with these design considerations that
To be explored,
to be in the design phase. Yeah, I think there's a lot more work on this that needs to be done, and that is to consider crosswalks, more crosswalks. One of the standards of an urban street system is you really need crosswalks every 600 feet. So looking at the appropriate crosswalks, if we don't have enough, people are going to cross anyway. Looking at more crosswalks as requested by the residents there. That we look at raised crosswalks at a couple of places. And I don't think we have the drainage issues we might have on Collister. That here's a place we can do it, I think, and that is to incorporate testing temporary traffic calming measures like we're doing on Rose Hill. So that would be, so one would be the crossings, 2 would be a raised crosswalks, 3, temporary traffic calming measures. And that, I think that'd be great because we could test it. And the other is more about it's procedural. So, and that is just to combine the separated ADA roadway project on Grand Forest and just put them together because it's confusing to the neighborhood when you have 2 separate projects. You say, oh, those concerns you raise on Grand Forest is actually this other project over here. So I would ask that they be combined and as you described, Margaret, they're going to be phased in. Things are going to be phased, but the descriptions is all part of one concept. And we may be further along in the details in specific pieces like the ADA crossings. But I think it's important that we combine these as one.
So number 4 is to look at combining.
Combining, yeah.
Okay.
That's
All
number
right.
4. And
That's it?
I would agree with Chris, but we'll just leave it out there. I totally agree with him. We're going to end up with a roundabout there. It just doesn't make sense not to have anything else. All
right, so we've got a motion with 4 suggestions for looking
Madam
at
President,
during the design phase. Is there a second?
before I second it, I'd like to ask Luke, Justin, if that's possible to do to merge those 2 projects together because of the whole phasing issue.
Madam President, members of the commission, excuse me, Commissioner Goldthorpe. I think, as I understand Commissioner Hanson's intent, is that he would like us to, as part of that federal aid project, which has already been identified on Quamish Way, incorporate the principles and findings of crosswalks and ADA and traffic calming into that project. We can certainly commit to that. I can't at this point expand the Quamish Way project to other segments, and as we've discussed, this may happen kind of segment by segment over time because of those project limits have already been approved, and we're moving forward on those project limits. Fortunately, this is a big area. This is miles and miles of roadway when you add it all up. Fortunately, I think addressing Quamish Way and then addressing Lake Forest and addressing some of these in pieces and parts is good. I think what we can do is look at the timing of some of these other improvements and see if we can coordinate from a construction perspective that some of the construction is happening at the same time. So when we're working on Quamish with federal aid dollars, maybe through the integrated 5-year work plan, we can say, let's try and link up some of these other projects from a timing perspective. And I can certainly commit to that. And I believe that's your intent,
That's
Commissioner
exactly my
Hanson.
intent. I think it's more than just Quamish, it's actually the lake, it's Grand Forest.
Right.
The federal aid project is
Right,
Grand Forest.
it's, yeah, so we're,
Is the little connecting point between the two.
yeah, I'm sorry, you're right.
That's all right,
I
that's
meant Grand Forest. And so if that's the intent of the commission, yes, I believe we can do that. And we can outline that as your intent, in the adopted, report. And then through the integrated 5-year work plan, you'll have another chance to see how that is all fitting together.
Good, thank you.
In that case, I'm happy to second.
Right.
Thank you.
We've got a second. Any further discussion?
Madam
Commissioner
President,
McKinney.
just one quick comment before we vote. I think this is a good project generally. I think it's worth commenting on one of the comments that was made by a member of the public about this project being limited to the scope that it is. Why not do the whole neighborhood all at once? And I think it's worth pointing out that every project has limits and constraints, and it would be nice if we could do everything all at once, but that's just not realistic. And so the reality is this project is what it is, and yeah, there are other things that need to be done at another time, and that's what will happen. But I think it's worth pointing out, or at least responding to that concern.
All right, thank you, Commissioner McKinney. All right, Commissioners, I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? All right, thank you very much. Motion passes. All right, our third and last public hearing for this evening is a Hollandale Targhee Neighborhood Improvement Concept Study request for adoption. We'll hear back from Margaret. We're not going to let you go yet. And I will go ahead and open the public hearing.
Right. Madam President, members of the Commission, for the record, Margaret Zellis, Senior Transportation Planner here at the Highway District. Before you tonight is the Hollandale Targhee Neighborhood Improvements Concept Study for adoption consideration. This was brought again before you in early November for the pre-adoption work session. The Hollandale Targhee Bikeway was first identified as part of the 2018 Roads to Bikeways Master Plan Addendum and later in the Integrated 5-Year Work Plan. This route will be the first bikeway implemented in the Southwest Boise and South Meridian areas, taking advantage of the local network connecting Locust Grove Road on the west side to Entertainment Avenue in the east. Mountain View High School, Pepper Ridge Elementary, public parks, and commercial destinations are some of the great attractors along this bikeway. The slide before you shows the planning area and the imagery of the existing conditions along EasyJet Drive, Hollandale Drive, and Targhee Street. The Hollandale Targhee neighborhood improvements are intended to provide an alternative low-stress network to help move bicyclists and pedestrians away from major roadways like Overland and Victory Road. This concept study identified and recommended improvements to intersections, crossings, accessibility, and connectivity throughout the bikeway. The public involvement process was focused on creating greater awareness of the bikeway, identifying areas of concern, and collecting recommendations. The engagement included stakeholder meetings and a public input period. The meetings engaged with stakeholders like the Neighborhood Association, Southwest Ada County Alliance, and the cities. The public involvement took place between April to May, where we received a total of 121 comments. In addition to pavement markings and signage, we've identified improvements that are in direct response to public concerns along the route. Recommended improvements for the Hollandale Targhee bikeway include bike lanes and speed humps at EasyJet Drive, enhanced crossing improvements at 5 Mile Road and K-Bar T Drive, bulb out recommendations at several locations between 5 Mile Road and Maple Grove Road, sidewalk improvements at Targhee between Maple Grove and Ranchero Way, and wayfinding signage, shared lane marking, and bike lane improvements throughout the entire bikeway. In response to Commission direction following the pre-adoption work session, staff has added additional pedestrian improvements and traffic calming elements to complete the sidewalk gaps at Targhee Street and Skillern Drive and Ash Park Lane. Additionally, staff identified several locations for bulb outs, which include at Bow Bar Way, Basin Creek Avenue, Hollandale Drive, and at Targhee Street. The estimated cost for the recommended improvements, including the additional pedestrian and traffic calming, is $2.2 million. Staff recommends adoption of the Hollandale-Targhee Neighborhood Improvement Concept Study as written. Thank you, and I will stand for any questions.
All right, thank you, Margaret, nice job. Commissioners, any questions or comments? All right, hearing none. Mrs. Spencer?
I think we took away the sign-up sheet before Marissa got a chance to sign up. I don't have anybody signed up to testify. Nope. Then
Marissa's good, okay.
we don't
Thanks.
have any.
I just have a couple questions for
All right.
Margaret.
Then we'll do that before we go to a
Great.
vote. Go
First,
ahead, Commissioner Hanson.
thank you very much. Of course, I'm more obsessed with everything from Maple Grove East, and Commissioner Goldthorpe's more obsessed with everything from Maple Grove West.
So you got it
But
covered.
we are gonna get united with a PHB right there and that crossing on Maple Grove, so that's great. I really appreciate that the curb extensions were added as part of this on Ranchero and 3 Mile Creekway, because that is the one segment, Targhee, and every neighbor who lives there says people turn into that and they floor it until they reach the end of the street. Or when they turn onto it, they floor it and then they head on out. So that is the speedway. It's because it's a straight shot and it's nice and wide. Not only putting sidewalks in, but defining their travel lane with a curb extension. And who knows, maybe even some chicanes around some parking would be really helpful in helping to define, this is your lane, stay in your lane. The rest is not your lane. And stay at, I think the speed limit's 35, but it should be 25. Do you know if it's 35 or 25 or?
Madam President, Commissioner, I would have to follow up with you on that.
Check on that. Just, I think of all the segments, because of its length and its straightness, that segment of Targhee has the most concern, certainly for the South Cole neighborhood. And so, any additional traffic calming would be great to help define that. And then once they get across Maple Grove with that, pedestrian hybrid beacon, they're on their way.
Okay, very good, thank you. No further comments or questions? All right, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing, and Commissioners, this is before you.
Okay, then I'll take my turn tonight.
I think so.
There you go.
Take it away.
Yes, I'd like to move that we approve the Hollandale-Targhee Neighborhood Improvement Concept Study. And the only addition that I would ask for is that Commissioner Hanson agree to be a crossing guard. Oh, no, just kidding. Just kidding. So I would make that motion.
All right,
Happy
thank
to.
you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? All right, I'll go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? All right, motion carries. 3 for 3. Thank you, Margaret. All right, that takes us to our last item for this evening, and that is public communications. And we do have a gentleman that's here to,
Have a couple.
we do have a couple.
Marcus?
Marcus, okay, and so the other gentleman has signed up, so we just
You
have to
changed
shoot.
your mind,
Okay.
you're not moving.
Yes, Leo Geis. Very good. Go ahead, Marcus. Go ahead and
Alright.
state your name and address, please.
Marcus Batson, 537 East Park Center Boulevard, apartment 118, Boise. So I just want to say thank you to Commissioners Hanson, Goldthorpe, and Pickering for attending the World Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims event that would happen towards the end of last month. So your attendance really showed that you do care about pedestrian and cyclist safety. And it's always good to see elected officials out to those events. So that's all I had to say.
Well, thank you. We
I
appreciate
just want to
it.
extend my thanks to you, Marcus, because you also announced at the Bicycle Advisory Committee that you are leaving us. We're gonna lose your expertise, and that you're going to take all of the great ideas of Ada County to Dallas instead, right? And so I just want to extend our appreciation for your contributions to the Bicycle Advisory Committee and to the commission as a whole.
All right, Madam President, Commissioner Hanson, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam President, I would
Have a
also
good trip.
like to advise Marcus that when he is in downtown Dallas, put the 9-foot traffic lanes to learn how to duck. Because they have big mirrors on the sides of those vehicles.
They do. That's a good takeaway. All right.
thank
Good luck to you, Marcus.
Yes,
Thank you. All right. Mr. Geis. Oh, Director Wong? Oh, okay. Oh. Welcome.
My name is Leo Geis. I live at 2940 South Goshen in Boise.
Welcome.
I'm going to purchase some credibility real quick. I am one of approximately 80 master aerial photographers in the world. I'm also a certified expert by Adobe in Photoshop and Premiere Pro. I'm one of approximately 40 Adobe certified video experts in the world. I spent the last several years as a subject matter expert, forensic subject matter expert for a chain of 20 casinos out of Las Vegas. And I love Idaho.
Very good.
I am involved in several assays of graphic assets and their production by public sector organizations such as ACHD. In fact, I've just completed and delivered assays for the city of Boise and for the Clark County courts systems down in Las Vegas. Now, these studies are being produced without compensation. They are intended for submission to academic, trade, and legal publications, including the Idaho Advocate. They are for the public benefit. Color and optical sciences are pretty much monstrously complex and fairly well ignored in both public and private sector organizations. About a month ago, I ran into Commissioner May downtown, and she explained a bit about the Garden City salt shed issue. Now, that particular issue is exquisitely relevant to my report because it is a visual asset, and I won't bore you with the details. It's just absolutely perfect. So I changed horses in the middle of a stream, and I'm requesting that ACHD, as a matter of my public records request of 9/21, September 21st, the number is 275-2022, release imaging assets to me for my use in that report. Now, I've been doing this for some time, and I have found that it is prudent to state that this is not a matter that is hostile to ACHD, nor is it a business mining adventure. It's for the purpose of furthering knowledge of color science and relative optical sciences in the public and private sectors, period. Any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
When we have public communications, the commission doesn't have the ability to interact and come up with a solution, but we can encourage you to, have you had a conversation with our legal team?
Yes, Mr. Price has been,
Oh,
yes.
okay, so that would be with Mr. Spears, okay. All right.
Understood.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for, I'm very familiar with your work. You do a nice job, and it was at the forum that we chatted.
Yes.
So thank you very much for coming. Do you want to have a conversation with Mr. Geis, or Scott would like to talk to the commission? Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Geis.
Madam President, members of the commission, for the record, Scott Spears, Assistant General Counsel. Leo correctly states that he submitted a public record request back in September 21st. And then through some conversations with staff and some emails and whatsoever, we were able to more narrowly tailor his request, or actually get a better idea of what he was asking for in his public record request, which was for contentious situations, for example, the salt shed and condemnation actions and photographs, aerial photographs taken in those matters. And when I saw that clarification of what he was asking for, the lawyer in me jumped out of my chair, because what he's asking for is privileged information, prepared in anticipation of litigation. And that raises the specter of the attorney-client privilege, and that in turn raises Idaho Code 74104, which says that any public record exempt from disclosure by federal or state law is also exempt. And as the lawyers in the room know, items of attorney-client privilege are exempt from disclosure. In particular, not only opinions from attorney-client communications, but trial prep materials. And so the lawyer in me got excited because if I were to authorize the release of those exempt records, I would be violating the law. And that would be Idaho Code 3-201, which says that I will maintain the confidence of my client. And I could be disbarred if I were to authorize the release of those privileged records. So that's what I communicated to Mr. Geis. That was, excuse me, back in November 16th. And last that I had heard, I thought he understood that point. And then there was a meeting to be scheduled with Dennis Meredith to go over photographs, aerial photographs that were not subject to attorney-client privilege. And that was to occur on the 21st of November. And then that meeting was canceled with Leo saying that maybe in a couple of weeks in December, perhaps, they could meet. So I've asked several times, well, at least once or twice, of Mr. Geis to provide us with specific examples exclusive of condemnation cases and the salt shed. And thus far, I've not received anything, and instead the meeting was canceled. So those are my reasons for not authorizing the release of that privileged information, those aerial photographs that, again, were trial prep material.
Well, we appreciate the update, and as everyone is aware, this is not something that we can deliberate during public communication. So we appreciate having the update, but perhaps you can maybe reschedule the meeting and so everybody has a clear understanding and go from there. So thank you very much, Mr. Spears.
Thank you.
All right. Director Wong.
Thank you, Madam President. Excuse me, Commissioners. I would like to fill in an omission I made earlier today in the Director's report. You might see two new additions to our fleet over here. These are the new e-bikes that you very graciously approved for purchase and to be used with our plans and projects team. We did suspect that or ask that the plans and projects deputy director would have these ridden in to provide a more,
early.
but they didn't. And such. But anyway, it is now part of the fleet, and it will be used as we go out to not only work through scoping operations, but again, planning across the board to give our team, again, under that auspices of accelerated innovation or lose, a more on the ground understanding of what projects can do and what projects may do going forward. So there they are. They've been certified, they've been reviewed, they've been looked at, there's training going on, and they actually do work.
Awesome. Great
Okay.
new addition to the team. Thank you very much. All right. With
Madam
that,
President?
we are, Commissioner McKinney.
Before we adjourn, I do have one, and this is a request for director and staff.
Okay.
In the past, it's my understanding that the commission has been provided with sort of upcoming.
We talked about, yes.
They're
You
taken
want to
care of.
update it? Yeah, it's
Okay,
coming.
taken
Yeah.
care of. All right, very good.
Right after we
Thank you.
spoke, all right? Sorry, we meant to mention that earlier and we got sidetracked. So over the horizon planning. All right, thank you. Have a good evening, drive safe. And, yep, we'll see. We are adjourned. Yeah, yeah.